Good evening. Tonight's story does not unfold on a battlefield or beneath a crown, but in the long shade cast by both. You will pass a quiet day inside a noble house of the Middle Ages where silence is expected, and your place rests just beyond the reach of candlelight. You will wake before dawn. You will serve without notice. You will endure with courtesy. Sleep will come lightly, if it comes at all. The gowns weigh on the arms. The floors bite with cold. The air carries soap, brass polish, and the dull scent of bread gone stale. If this kind of tale helps you rest, you may like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly eases you. And if you wish, leave a note about where you are listening from and what hour holds you now. There is comfort in knowing who else drifts into sleep with the same soft story. Close the door with care. Step to the edge of the great hall. Listen for the kitchen bell. The day begins, as most days do, before the bell sounds. It comes before the gentry stir beneath feather quilts. It comes before the chapel candle burns. It even comes before the cook mutters her way into the smoke-dark half of the kitchen. There is a pause, a brief stillness. It belongs to the servants, or perhaps it hangs over them, like a breath held just before a long climb. This is the last quiet they will know. The servants' quarters, if the name can be stretched that far, sit well away from comfort. Such ease belongs to the family and perhaps a favored maid, or the steward when his ledgers behave. The rest sleep where space allows, in narrow annexes, in drafty sheds, in stone passages beneath the house. Some lie above the stables, if they have learned to sleep through the smell. These rooms are shared. Privacy is a prize kept for those who count. A dozen bodies crowd beneath a low ceiling. They lie shoulder to shoulder on rough mattresses stuffed with rushes. Blankets are passed from hand to hand. So are coughs, snores, and fleas. All are part of the house, each in its way useful. The air hangs heavy. It is thick with sweat and smoke. It clings to wool and to skin. In time, it seeps into you. It joins the ache in your back and the steady sense of where you stand in the world. No rooster calls the servants awake, not yet. The morning starts with softer sounds, footsteps on cold stone, leather tapping the floor, a bucket scraping a wall, a body rising from warmth into duty. In one corner lies the youngest lad, 12 years old, perhaps less. His family needed coins early. He rubs his eyes and blinks at the dark. His name does not matter. For years he will be called Boy. If another arrives, he will become Elder Boy, and the new one, New Boy. The system is neat, if dull. He has work waiting, more than one task. First come the hearths. The fires died in the night. It falls to him to wake them again, before the nobles open their eyes. The trick lies in waking the embers without drawing too deep a breath. The ash is fine and sharp, cruel to the lungs. He nudges the coals with care, muttering when one snaps back at him. He keeps his voice low. He always does. Around him, the others rise and dress. There is no slow meal, no idle pause before the day. Morning is not for thought. It is for haste. Tunics slide over linen shifts, boots are buckled tight, hair is bound back or pushed under coifs. The clothes are thick, rough wool, so coarse it might as well be bark. Still, they hold heat, and before dawn, heat is treasure. In a modest nobility household, the staff might number 20 or 50, depending on the season, the family's reach, or whether a wedding or hunt draws near. Everyone knows where they stand. The scullery girl does not speak to the steward. The stable boy does not address the lady's maid unless spoken to. Rank is remembered at all times. Forget it, and someone else will take your place. At the head of the servants stand the steward or the housekeeper. They keep accounts, count stores, speak with traders, and visit officials. They may even have a room of their own, perhaps a key. Even so, they rise early. A servant still in bed after sunrise invites questions.
One girl, Marjorie perhaps, moves through the corridors without a sound. She has been sent to the solar where the lady sleeps. She did not ask for the task. She was chosen for her light step and steady hands. She knows not to speak first, not to knock too hard, and not to meet her mistress's eyes unless called on. She sets out the day's closing before the noblewoman wakes, wool if the air is damp, fine linen if guests are due. The jewels remain locked in the chest. She does not touch them. Her hands are rough. The ladies are not. Elsewhere, the kitchen wakes. Bread must be mixed. Porridge must be set to simmer. The cook is already swearing when the second helper arrives. The fire there never fully dies, but it still needs care. The air is thick with soot and drive. The cook is not a man to cross. He has served 3 lords and buried 2. He throws knives, not in anger, only to make a point. Outside, the sky stays dark. A pale line gathers in the east, but the sun holds back. The bell in the chapel tower waits in silence. When it rings, it will pull the house into motion. Nobles to prayer, servants to work. The bell divides the day. Morning prayers, midday meal, evening vigil. Time is kept, not for ease, but for order. For now, time is counted in tasks, pots emptied, hearths lit, steps taken without sound. The matter is alive. Stone and timber, yes, but also breath and heat and motion. The servants are its blood. They move without pause, unseen, keeping it whole. In one hall, the old rushes are cleared away and replaced. Fresh herbs are scattered, sweet gale, lavender, sometimes mint, not for comfort, but to hide yesterday's smell. Young girls or older women take this work. Their backs still bend easily. They move fast, eyes down, arms full of straw. At last, the bell sounds, low, grave, a command, not a choice. The house seems to draw in one breath. In the chapel, the family kneels, cloaks stitched with thread and colored brush the stone. Their voices echo beneath the arching roof. The servants stand at the rear if they are allowed inside at all. Some pray, others close their eyes and count heartbeats. Then the day truly begins. There is no flourish, no song, only footsteps, quiet orders, and the steady weight of habit. Each morning follows the same shape. Some find comfort in it, those who draw meaning from duty, who rest in routine. Others bear it while dreaming of saved coin, escape, or the small chance of rising higher. A trusted valet, a favored maid. It happens, though not often. The rest simply carry on. They wake, they work, they sleep. Days slip through them like water through open hands. The boy finishes with the hearth and wipes soot from his palms. He is too young to feel hard anger, too old for wonder. He moves on. Marjorie folds her mistress's nightdress, smoothing the cloth. She checks the chamber pot half full, as expected, and makes a note to have it changed. She does not flinch. That passes within weeks. The steward walks the corridors, listening to beams, counting bolts of cloth, pausing at a loose hinge with faint displeasure. He is, above all else, a man of hinges. In the kitchen, the cook scolds 2 helpers and burns his thumb on the griddle. He calls for the flour sack. It feels too light. He says nothing for now. Someone will hear of it later. All this happens while the noble family sleeps.
Dreams remain unbroken. Their beds stay warm, their floors shine, their slippers wait by the fire, set just so. None of this is chance. It happens because long before the first bell, someone rose in the dark, pulled on rough wool, struck a spark, held a careful breath, and began again. The first tasks of the day hold no glory, they earn no praise, most go unseen, yet they matter. A great household, even one of modest standing, runs not on display, but on habit, on work repeated until it becomes invisible. Before breakfast, before prayer, before the cook decides the stew has been salted too much, there are duties, small, quiet, essential. Fires, floors, footsteps. That is where it starts.
Not with the grand hearth in the hall, that comes later. These first flames serve warmth, not show. They are coaxed to life in kitchens, storerooms, servant halls, and private chambers, each lit by a careful hand. Too little breath and the flame dies. Too much and ash leaps at your face like a startled cat. It is a craft, a silent one. No singer tells tales of the kitchen boy who lit the main fire without losing an eyebrow, but perhaps they should. A boy just past 11, perhaps a year shy of it, kneels at the hearth in the outer kitchen. His knees grind into cold stone. He breathes softly into the ash, eyes tight with focus. His fingers are already black, though the day has barely begun. He slips a twist of kindling under the grate and waits. His breath clouds the air. The cold bites hard. It creeps through wool, through skin, deep into the bone. There is no space to dwell on it. Nearby, a girl of 14 hauls water from the well in the courtyard. The pail knocks against her leg with each step. Her arms burn, and this is only her third trip. She steadies the weight. If the water spills, her gown will soak through. Wet wool clings and chills and rubs raw. It is misery. She does not think about it. The laundry maid waits for that water. Any pause here slows the washing. Slow washing delays the dressing, and no one delays the dressing of the lady of the house, not if they wish to stay. The floors come next. A manor hall floor is not polished wood dressed with velvet, as later ages might imagine. It is stone or packed earth, covered in rushes. These are not for beauty. They soak spills, catch scraps, soften sound. In time, they foul. They must be swept out, hauled away, fed to pigs or burned, then laid again with fresh herbs tucked in, not for comfort, but to dull the smell of life lived indoors. This work falls to the lowest hands, the scullery maids, the untried, the unlucky. Hands rough, knees aching, they work alone or in pairs. One sweeps with a broom of bound twigs, another gathers refuse into a wooden pan, breadcrumbs, bones, ash, once in a while a dead mouse. The rhythm stays slow and wide, never rushed. Quick work only lifts dust. Above them hang banners and wall cloths, hunts, saints, long family lines stitched in thread and pride. Below, the servants keep their eyes down. Footsteps mark the third part of the morning, not the sound, but the paths they take. Who walks where? Who hears whom? Steps mean motion. They mean the house is waking, on purpose. A maid crosses the west passage with clean linen stacked in her arms. She dips her head to the steward. He does not answer. He is counting. Sheets, candles, cloth, people, all must be tallied. In the yard, the stable hands begin their rounds. The horses are restless. One kicks its stall wall. A gray mare stamps, nostrils wide. The air smells of hay, dung, and damped leather. The stable boy speaks low to them, not for reply. Quiet calms beasts. He shows them more care than most people. An older servant climbs the narrow stairs to the lord's solar. He carries a bucket of coals and a small iron tool. The brazier must be lit before the noble rises. The floor must be warm before a foot touches it. Cold stone is judged improper. He works fast but with care. One fleck of soot on the stitched rug will be seen. Not by the lord, by the lady's maid. She sees everything. In the buttery, the tapster checks the ale. He thumps each barrel and listens. He measures with a wax-marked stick. Pitch and linen seal the seams. If one leaks, blame will land on him, sometimes hard. Ale theft is no small thing. Servants have been known to drink after hours, not in protest, but because sleep comes easier when the mind is dull. The air warms a little now. The sun has not risen, but its promise slips through the leaded glass in a pale gold wash. More work waits. The washroom is set, towels laid. A shallow copper basin is filled, water warmed with a poker pulled from the fire. The family will wash faces and hands before prayer. Not the body, that comes less often, but the face must look clean, hair must be neat. Even minor nobility must appear so. A young girl crouches by the privy. She drew the short straw. The night jars must be emptied. A chamber pot is simple, clay, sometimes brass, but it must be carried without notice and scrubbed well. No one wants reminders of a baroness's needs. Such truths belong below stairs. Near the ladder, a boy turns the spit, slow, even. A leg of mutton hangs from its hook. It is not for breakfast, but the cook likes to be ready. He has muttered about guests since last night. No one knows if it's true. Better to be ready. Few crimes are worse than serving cold meat. The servants move without orders. They know the pattern. Learning comes not from lessons, but from watching, from doing, from the rare, sharp blow when one errs. A new hand studies the old ones, not just their tasks, but their timing. Where do they stop? When they speak, when they stay silent. Rank runs through the house like mortar and stone. Steward over the chamberlain, chamberlain over groom, groom over scullery boy, all beneath the family. And the family answers upward, to crown and to God, depending on the hour. Even among servants there are fine lines. The lady's maid may be born lower than the cook, but her closeness to the family grants her favors, better food, softer cloth, a room with a door. The laundress may speak plainly, but she knows every mark and secret hidden in the Lord's linens. A good servant never forgets where they stand. The clever ones learn how to move within that space. Now the chapel bell sounds. Its note is deep and heavy, almost sad. It rolls through the house like a long breath. No names are called, none is needed. The nobles are drawn toward prayer. The servants turn back to motion. Feet shuffle, heads dip. Not always from faith, but from habit. The first stretch of...
For now, beneath stone and silver, the manor keeps its quiet pulse. Fires, floors, footsteps, the work no one sees, the work that allows all else to happen. There is food in the manor, at times great amounts of it, roasted meats, pies glazed gold, fresh trout, sugared fruits, cheeses wrapped in herbs, crusty loaves pulled steaming from the oven. It shines on polished platters and is served with practiced grace on trestle tables beneath carved beams. Nobles eat with clean knives and careful fingers. That is not the food we mean. We go down the steps now, past carved angels, past oak panels, down a narrow passage into the kitchen, and farther still into the servants' hall. This is where the rest of the food goes, or what remains of it. Leftovers is a thin word for a strict custom. In a well-run house, food is measured by rank. Who eats, how much, how often. The steward watches, the cook watches, and some say God watches too. At the top of the servant ranks sit those closest to the family, the steward, the lady's maid, the chaplain, the tutor if there is one. At times they eat below stairs. At times they dine alone in small rooms, a plate of cold roast, cheese, a jug of ale, plain but better than most. In the servants' hall the meal is different. The room is long and low. The ceiling presses down. The air smells of damp wool and old onion skins. The meal begins with bread. It always does. Dark, dense, made from barley or rye, sometimes mixed with grain, not the soft white loaves above. This bread is heavy, filling in the way stones fill a sack. Then comes pottage, a thick soup if the day is kind, beans, peas, leeks, onions, cabbage, herbs. If luck smiles, broth from a bone. Sometimes a shrin of meat survives. Often it does not. No one complains. A servant learns to hope carefully. You eat what is set before you. You ask nothing. If the pot is thin today, it may be thicker tomorrow. If the bread is hard, you soak it in ale. If the ale is sour, it still keeps the water from killing you.
Ale flows freely, not from kindness, but from sense. Clean water is at risk. Ale is weak, barely strong enough to sting the tongue, but it feeds and it is safe. Children drink it. Older men sip it. If you are lucky, it is warm. The meal passes fast, not because it is fine, but because work waits. Servants sit on benches. The table is bare wood, dark with age. There are no napkins, no forks. One eats with a spoon or with fingers. Lose your spoon and you borrow or go without. Talk is allowed in small measure. Laughter is rare. Weariness shapes the room more than solemn thought. Some glance upward, not in prayer, but toward the floor above, where the family will soon dine beneath linen and carved bowls. The difference does not sting. It is known. It has always been so. In large houses, each store has a keeper. Bread and grain, wine and ale, meat and fish. Each watches the others closely. If bread vanishes, blame finds the one who guards it. If ale tastes thin, questions follow. If meat goes missing, the cook is called. Those below them are noticed only when something fails. Not all food reaches the hall. Some is gathered quietly. Not stolen, gathered. There is a difference. A platter returns half-eaten. It is checked. A bird hardly touched may find its way into a pie. If too far gone, it may be passed down. Often the dogs eat first. Still, clever hands know where scraps hide. Ends of cheese, the fruit has grown soft, crusts trimmed away. A boy slips an apple into his pocket. A girl tucks bread into her apron, not openly, quietly. This is not greed, it is need. Servants work long hours. They lift, they scrub, they carry. Food keeps bodies moving. A boy who skips a meal drops a platter. A dropped platter ends a place. On feast days, the house shifts. Dishes arrive in waves. Game birds, spiced wine, sweet fruits, jellies shaped like beasts. The servants work twice as hard. Heat scorches skin, feet ache, tempers fray. Afterward, sometimes there is reward. The steward may allow a table for the staff. Bones picked clean, pie filling without crust, a taste of honeyed fruit. It is little, yet in a life of thin broth, it feels like excess. A boy once bit into a
sugared plum and cried. He had never known sweet. Such days are rare. Most days are the same. Dark bread, pottage, ale. On good mornings, an egg. Meals follow the clock of rank. Before the family wakes, after they dine. Late at night, once silver is polished and set away. Servants eat fast, often standing. The kitchen never rests. Fires must be watched, pastry turned, stew stirred. One eats while walking, a crust in cloth, a spoonful taken behind a door, peas eaten raw. The cook allows no lingering. Few things anger him more than a seated scullion chewing slowly. Even so, the diet shifts with the year. Spring brings greens and nettles. Summer brings peas and beans. Autumn brings apples and nuts. Winter brings what was stored well, or little at all. Rations are known by heart. Bread per week, porridge per day. Ale twice daily, meat on Sundays, if ever. To take more is not only theft, it upsets the balance. Someone else goes hungry. Not all suffer the same. The steward eats better than the stable boy, the nurse better than the spit-turner. Rank reaches even the table. Yet among the lowest there is kindness. Bread is shared, bowls are passed. A girl may whisper, "Eat mine," and slide her portion across before hurrying back to work. Such favors are traded quietly. After the meal, bowls are scraped, rarely washed. Water costs too much. They are wiped, maybe rinsed with ale. Spoons return to pockets. Scraps go to dogs,
pigs, or fire. The table is wiped, benches pushed in, and that is all. No lingering, no sweets, no talk of hunts or power. That belongs upstairs. Below stairs, meals are brief pauses, fuel, nothing more. Tomorrow there will be bread again, pottage again, the same, and so it goes. To serve a noblewoman is not like the kitchen, where heat scorches and the cook roars. It is not like the stables, thick with mud and dung. It is quieter, cleaner, more watchful, and just as demanding. You move softly, you see everything, you say little. You learn the weight of a glance, the danger of a sound made at the wrong moment. You belong for a time until you do not. And when night comes, when candles gutter low and the household stills, the servants return to their quarters. They lie down shoulder to shoulder. They close their eyes. Soon enough, before the bell, before the light, before the world above stirs, they will rise, and it will begin again, where discomfort at least follows a known pattern. The work of a lady's maid is different, quieter, finer, just as demanding, but in subtler ways. A noble house runs on rank, and within it the lady's maid holds an odd place. She is not low, yet never high. She eats dark bread and wears rough wool, yet she moves through the most private rooms. She sees the baroness without veil or pose. She hears her speak without care for who listens. She knows the scent of her perfume and the smell beneath it. More than most, she knows how quickly favor can vanish. Step into the solar. It is a modest room, yet rich. Tapestries line the walls, cushions soften the benches. The air carries dried lavender and crushed mint. Shutters stand ajar, letting pale morning light filter through oiled parchment. A carved chair rests by the fire. A box of embroidery silks sits beneath it. A half-read psalter lies open on a bench. At the far end, the lady's maid, called her Joan. She folds a linen shift with care. She has been awake for hours. Her mistress does not rise with bells. Her morning begins only when the fire is warm, the water is ready, the basin set in place. Joan has already chosen the day's clothing. Weather, weekday, visitors, all weighed. Today it is green wool lined with squirrel fur, plain enough to be proper, soft at the throat. The fur is brushed, the hem shook free, lace checked for snags. A girdle of copper links lies coiled beside it. Undergown first, shift beneath, slippers warmed by the fire. Joan waits. When her lady stirs, Joan moves at once, yet never rushes. Speed shows poor breeding. She opens the shutters a little more, just enough. She greets her mistress softly. Water is poured, steam rises. A cloth is wrung and laid across waiting fingers. Nothing is hurried, nothing missed. Hair comes next. Joan removes the sleeping coif and combs slowly, starting at the scalp. A noblewoman's hair is pride. It must not be pulled. Today it will be twisted and pinned under a veil. Joan takes the pins, bone-headed, sharp, and holds them between her lips as she works. She uses the same boxwood comb each day, darkened with oil, smoothed by years of hands. The lady speaks. Joan listens. She talks of gowns seen at court, of a rival's clumsy hem, of her husband's snoring, of her sister's poor Latin. Joan answers with murmurs and nods. She never corrects, never asks, never laughs unless invited. She reads mood as others read letters. A pause, a breath, a look. Dressing follows. The shift slips over the head, smoothed, sleeves tugged, ties set. Then the kirtle laced close at the sides. Joan's hands move from memory. Pull, knot, pull, knot. Soothing, unless a lace snaps. The gown comes next, heavier than it seems. Joan lifts it, holds it open, and guides her mistress's step. Fastens the sides, careful with a loop that always catches. She has mended the girdle clasps. The veil is pinned just right, not too tight, not wrong. Slippers last. Joan steps back. She checks her work, then asks for the mirror. It is polished steel, enough to show what matters. The lady leans close, tilts her head, frowns. Joan waits. At last, it will do. Joan curtsies. The day continues in quiet motion. Joan follows 3 steps behind, sewing basket, cloak, handkerchief. She takes letters, carries messages, offers rose water to pale guests. She waits in doorways. She hears everything. There is talk in this house, soft talk, silk-wrapped talk, whispers of ledgers and affairs, of cottages and grudges. Joan keeps it all. She has seen what loose tongues earn. Agnes spoke once, too freely, too kind to a page. She was gone within the hour. No pay, no word. Joan helped her pack. They said nothing. In the afternoon, Joan prepares for tomorrow. She brushes fur, airs bodices, checks hems, sharpens pins, polishes buckles. She sews by narrow light, thread waxed, needle fine. If her lady naps, Joan rests too, briefly, seated, head bowed, always ready. At dusk she sets the chamber, candles lit, curtains drawn, night rail laid out, a warmed cloth for tired shoulders. She undresses her mistress slowly, folds each piece, sets slippers by the fire, unpins the veil, unfastens the girdle, brushes hair again, 50 strokes, braids it loose. If the lady is silent, Joan is silent. If she speaks, Joan listens. Sometimes the lady cries, turned to the wall. Joan offers a linen cloth. No comfort, only presence. That is the line she must not cross. Joan sleeps on straw by the door. Her rest ends when her lady calls. Some nights she does not sleep at all. Dreams, water, a sudden thought. Joan rises each time. Closeness is not sameness. Still, there is order in it. In folded cloth, in tied knots, in days stitched together. The lady never truly thanks her, yet she knows she is seen. So time passes, quietly, in fabric and whispers. Joan moves through it all like a shadow sewn to silk. The kitchen, despite what some claim, is not the heart of the manor. It is the furnace. It smokes and sweats and boils before dawn and long after the hall goes dark. It is loud.
Rough. It is never still. Go down into it. Stone walls are black with soot. A hearth wide enough for a whole sheep. Iron hooks from beams. Tables scarred with knives and dusted in flour. Fat smeared where no one bothered to wipe. The smell hits at once. Ash, onions, sour ale, wet wood, grease, burnt something unnamed. In a great house, the kitchen is its own dominion, and like any dominion, it has a ruler, the cook. Broad in the shoulder and arm, heavy in step, his voice crashes like iron on stone. He has served 4 lords, outlasted a mistress, survived hunting mishaps, and one bout of sickness he swears was not his doing. He allows no waste, no delay, no foolishness, least of all from the spit boys. Now, the spit boy is perhaps the lowest rung in the kitchen. He is 10 or 12 or 13, thin as a rail and always half burned. His work is the spit, a long iron rod slung over the hearth, hunks of meat turning for hours on end. Turn too slow and one side chars. Turn too fast and it cooks unevenly. Stop at all, and you learn why the older hands speak in lowered voices about the last boy who tried it. He left with a welt across his back and a broken tooth. Connected or not, the lesson stuck. The kitchen runs on loud order and constant strain. The kitchener, the cook's senior hand, keeps watch over supplies: barley, beans, dried fish, salted pork, eggs, roots, and the shrinking hoard of preserved plums. He keeps count, not on loose paper, which costs too much, but in a ledger locked away, brought out when questions start. Near him works the scullery maid, arms red from the trough, apron soaked, hair pinned back tight. She scrubs pots black with soot, knives dulled from hard use, and pewter plates bent at the rim. Her hands never rest. Her mouth rarely does either, always muttering about the mess someone else made. Undercooks tend the boiling pots, one for pottage, one for sauces, one for something that began as fish and has since become a mystery. They stir with long paddles, dodging sparks and splashes. Burns happen, blisters are ignored. A good kitchen hand learns to keep moving, no matter what drips down into her shoes. Meals arrive in waves, and the kitchen never truly stills. Breakfast, if you can call it that, comes first. For the nobles, it is small: a roll, a slice of cold meat, warmed ale or wine cut with water. More show than hunger. They do not eat heavy in the morning. That is left to those who work. Even for this light meal, the kitchen flares. Bread must be cut, crusts trimmed, the right cheese found, butter softened but not melted, ale tasted by someone trusted and not too thirsty. The servants eat earlier, faster, and worse. Coarse bread, porridge if there is time, dried peas if there is not. The real storm builds before dinner, served late morning or soon after. This is the largest meal for the family. Several courses, a roast, soup, boiled greens, a tart or custard if the pantry allows it. In winter, roots and dried fruit. In summer, fresh herbs and soft cheeses. Each dish must be done right, not because the Lord is a master of taste, but because he takes offense easily. The cook shouts across the heat, "More salt! No, not that! The fine salt, you donkey! Who plucked this capon? It still has feathers on the leg." A boy scurries away with the bird. Another scrapes fat from a pan. A girl is sent for parsley and returns with mint. She is sent again. There is rank here, too, even in what goes into the pot. Pork is common. Mutton is proper. Beef costs more and keeps poorly. Fowl is a treat. Goose, swan, the prized peacock served with feathers stitched back on after roasting. Not for taste, for display. The last one nearly caught fire when the plume brushed too close to the flame. Sugar is rarer than meat. It sits in a locked box, saved for feast day pies or for days when the lady falls into a dark mood. Spices are guarded like coin. Saffron, cinnamon, cloves, pepper. Pepper is weighed, truly weighed. Use too much without leave, and wages may shrink, or worse, a hand may be accused of theft. A missing spoon of cloves can become a crime. When the dishes are ready, the cook does not carry them out. That work goes to servers, footmen or pages in livery, with clean hands and steady steps. Display matters. Drop a tray before the Lord, and you may as well beg to be dismissed. In some houses, it ends even harder. Usually. Back in the kitchen, the cook sits at last, and only for a moment. Soon enough, supper must be set, smaller, near dusk. Some food is reused, though seldom for the Lord's table. A pie made from the day's roast, custard set again. The servants eat what is scraped from pans. Some days it is enough, some days it is not. The cook pretends not to see a girl stealing crust from a pie edge, so long as no one else notices. He is harsh, not blind. The fire never dies completely. Ash is banked, coals nudged inward. The hearth is watched in shifts. If it goes out, it must be raised again from nothing, and the cook will not forgive the one who let it happen. Rules live here.
unwritten but known. Do not touch the meat before the cook carves it. Do not taste from the ladle. Do not use the good bowl for servant stew. Do not sit unless the cook sits first. Do not sing, ever. The last boy who sang while pudding was being made was sent to the stables for a week. He came back quieter. He still hums, but only under his breath. Festivals turn the kitchen into a battle line. Pies by the dozen, a whole boar with an apple wedged in its mouth, spiced wine boiled in vats, custards shaped like beasts, show dishes made for nothing but wonder, fish pie with live birds inside, meant to burst into flight when cut, a marvel when it works, a disaster when it does not. On those days the servants barely eat, too much carrying, too much fetching, too much scrubbing. Still, if the mood runs high, the cook may toss a reward, sometimes a bone, truly a bone, a marrow bone handed to the scullery maid, a lick of honey scraped from a bowl. When the guests leave, when candles go dark, when the last goblet is wiped dry, the kitchen rests for a breath. The cook wipes his brow, the spit boy slumps against the wall, the scullery maid dips her arms into the trough one last time. The work is hot, endless, poorly paid, yet it is safer than open fields and warmer than the stables, so they stay, because tomorrow, before the sun, someone will need to boil water.
The cook shouts about a missing tart. Someone boiled the custard too long. The kitchener is in the root cellar, arguing with a rat. The rat is winning. Up in the hall, the work is calmer, only by a little. Pages set trestle tables. They scrub each plank with vinegar and lemon peel to hide the scent of yesterday's turnips. Linen cloths are unrolled and pressed flat. Pewter goblets are lined in pairs, all facing the same way. Guests bring their own knives, but the Lord's table is laid in full, as it should be. Herbs are scattered across the floor, lavender, thyme, rosemary, partly to cover smell, partly to display wealth. Only a rich house can afford fragrance thrown underfoot. In a corner, minstrels tune their pipes and lutes. Softly, not yet. A wrong note now could send a nervous steward to shave their bread ration. Elsewhere, the lady's maid presses her mistress's best veil over a box of warm stones. The gown waiting on the bed is blue wool trimmed with fur, worn only for feasts. The lady has been sour all morning. A jewel is missing from her girdle, and she blames the laundry girl, who has not set foot near the solar in weeks. The girl is elbow-deep in soap, wringing wax from a tapestry spilled on during last week's vigil. Upstairs, the family prepares at its own pace. Downstairs, the servants move as if sparks have caught in their clothes. Now come the showpieces. A pastry shaped like a castle, filled with spiced minced meat and stained yellow with saffron. A roasted swan with gold leaf on its wings. Then the final wonder, a subtlety, a sugar sculpture of a hunting scene. The sugar came from far away at great cost. The sculptor, young, quick-fingered, and terrified, sweats as he works. "Don't breathe too close to the stag," he mutters. "It will fall." In the stable yard, grooms brush horses in case a guest asks for a tour. The stable boy is told to fetch a hound to sit near the high table. The dog stinks, but it looks the part. Then the steward appears in the kitchen. Talk dies at once. He says nothing. He walks slowly, hands clasped behind his back, watching. A scullery maid drops a spoon. A boy pretends he did not just slip a plum into his pocket. The steward checks the bread, counts the pies, and taps the ale barrel, scratches a note into wax. One small nod, then he leaves. The kitchen breathes again. By midday, guests arrived, neighbors, lesser nobles, men of the cloth. They dismount in the courtyard. The porter greets them. Cloaks are taken, boots wiped, gloves warmed by the fire. The first course goes out. Servants line up, each carrying a dish, moving in rhythm through the great doors. Pages dart ahead to swing them wide. The cook watches from the kitchen, tight as a drawn bow. The food must be hot, upright, above all impressive. Roast pork with apples,
fish in aspic, boiled capon with parsley. A man stumbles, but the platter stays level. Praise rises in the hall. The cook lets out a breath he did not know he held. The servants retreat to the shadows and ready the next wave. Their stomachs growl. They will not eat until the third course, and even then not in the hall. They will crouch in a corner of the buttery, licking grease from crusts and swallowing the dregs of ale. Someone once tried to slide a roasted quail off the Lord's platter and hide it up a sleeve. They were caught before the bird was cold, dismissed before dessert. The steward never raised his voice. The second course follows: rabbit in sweet and sour sauce, onion tarts, boiled carrots and leeks, a custard that looks fine, though it has curdled a touch. No one speaks of it. The guests drink and laugh too loud. The minstrels begin a slow tune, light enough for talk, strong enough to cover a belch. The third course brings the subtleties: the sugar castle, a pastry lion, the stag still standing, antlers intact. The sculptor, hiding near the wall, nearly cries from relief. Then the fourth course: nuts, dried fruit, candied ginger, wafers, cheese. Guests nibble and linger. The cook sags onto a bench. Servants eat whatever they can, where they can. Crusts, scraps, a fistful of raisins if no one is watching. No one thanks them. No one points to them. They are not meant to exist in the story. When the feast ends, the real labor begins. Platters cleared, bones gathered, barrels drained, tables wiped, linen hauled away for boiling, rushes swept up and thrown into the fire. The cook gives his last orders, already thinking of tomorrow's bread. Upstairs, the lady peels off her veil and hands it to her maid without a word. Shoes are kicked aside, the girdle unfastened. She complains about the music. Servants do not answer. Hours pass, candles die, trays stack, dishes are rinsed, ash is swept. Near midnight, the manor finally sleeps. In the kitchen, a boy finds the last corner of a meat pie on a shelf. He eats it cold and calls it the best thing he has tasted in months. The household is never fully quiet. Even in the dead of night, after candles are pinched out and coals banked, there are still steps, soft, measured, unseen. A door creaks, a figure slips through, a voice murmurs too low to catch or too loud for its own safety. This is not the noise of rule or labor, it is the sound of secrets. And if the manor holds secrets, the servants end up holding them too. Not because anyone confides in them, because service puts them everywhere, behind drapes, in doorways, in corners, near doors left a crack open. They are present when others forget they are out. They hear because they cannot avoid hearing. They remember because they cannot afford not to. Take the chamberlain, the Lord's personal attendant. He manages wardrobe, private rooms, schedule, and sometimes excuses. He handles letters, lays out tunics, stands silent through talk not meant for him. Land, debts, alliances, names spoken with weight. The Lord barely looks at him, sometimes calls him by the wrong name, never asks if he has a wife, does not know or does not care that he does not. Yet the chamberlain knows what the Lord fears, what he wants, who he envies. He has seen letters that were never received. He knows the baron drinks before meetings on feast days. He knows there is a sword hidden behind a wall panel. He once heard the Lord tell his confessor he hated his eldest son. He says nothing. He writes nothing. He waits. And the lady's maid, by now, has heard more than her mistress would ever admit aloud. Sharp remarks about guests, sobs after certain letters, rage when a favored gown appears on another woman, fixation on a silver comb, kept and never worn. The maid knows how often the lady takes her tincture. She knows about the chaplain's midnight visits. She knows which drawer holds jewelry when the Lord is angry. Once or twice she has seen bruises where bruises should not be. She says nothing. She is not foolish. Even the stable boy, lowest of the lot, sees what he should not. He watched the knight's page press a pouch into the steward's assistant's hands, something inside clinking softly. He saw the baron's youngest daughter ride alone and return flushed an hour later. Once he found an unopened letter tucked in a saddle blanket. He couldn't read, but he knew the seal. It belonged to the cousin later cast out. He buried the letter in the dung heap. No one asked. They only watched him more after. Then there is the household priest, the chaplain. Not quite a servant, but close enough. He hears confessions.
He blesses bread and wine. He chats politely at supper. He also knows who gives more than they can spare, who lies, who steals, who climbs into the wrong bed. He records none of it in the parish roll, but he knows who is honest, who is clever, who has seen too much. Not every secret is whispered. Some sit in ledgers locked in the steward's room, entries that do not fit, a second boat to velvet that never reached the wardrobe, an overpayment to a mason for work never done. The steward sees it all. He does not fix the figures. He adds them to a quiet column marked useful later. In a house built on rank and custom, knowledge becomes its own kind of money. Not coins. Servants rarely see much of that. But the quiet facts. Who borrowed a horse without leave? Who slips down to the kitchens at night? Which noble craves what the church calls shameful? Most of the time, that knowledge stays tucked away, like a candle stub saved for winter. Still, every so often, someone strikes a spark. A footman might say, careless, casual, that the steward's son has been sleeping in the guest wing. Strange, for a name not written on any roll. A chambermaid might mention that a certain visitor asks for fresh rushes twice a day, though the floor is dry. Little remarks, offered softly, traded not for sport, but for staying alive in the place. A cook's assistant learns the laundry maid is with child and not married. He holds his tongue until he needs cover for a shift. Then it becomes a bargain. Just this once, he says, and just this once lasts until the next time. Not every secret is scandal. Some are small and plain and odd. A page who claims gentle birth but was really a cooper's son. A maid who can read and does it by firelight when the kitchen finally cools. A scullery boy who saves candle ends to melt into a lump and sell in the village. No one asks, no one tells, everyone notices. In the evenings, after the family has gone to bed and the coals have sunk low, servants gather where they can, corners, landings, passages, not in comfort, just in pause. Someone sharpens a knife, someone darns a stocking, someone mutters about the steward's new boots. The air feels like the breath between storms, and if anyone begins to talk too boldly, eyes flick toward the dark. The walls are thick, but they are not deaf. There is a story the household keeps alive. A servant once tried to sell what he knew. He stole a private letter, sealed, and slipped it to a traveling friar. The friar reported it. The servant was dismissed before the hour was out. No one watched him leave. The tale is told again and again, not as a threat exactly, but as a reminder. Even silence has rules. Even death does not shut every mouth. There was a nursemaid, long gone, who raised the baron's children. She saw them born, saw them grow, saw what they became. She lived above the kitchen in a small room hung with herbs and shared with a cat no one liked. One winter she died in her sleep, a wooden toy still in her hand. After she was buried, someone found a bundle under her bed, letters, scraps of cloth, a broken ring. No one knows what became of it. Yet the baron's second son was sent abroad that spring, and he never returned. The servants noticed. They always do. They know which door creaks before dawn. They know which child belongs to which father. They know who leans too hard on wine, who fears the priest, who locks a door with shaking hands. Yet survival in a noble house is not about what you know. It is about what you can forget. The ones who last are not the loudest or the cleverest. They are the patient ones. The ones who understand that truth spoken at the wrong moment can ruin you, and that the safest place for knowledge is behind your teeth. There is power in silence, hard, heavy power. So they go on with lowered eyes and open ears, wine poured, linen folded, lamps lit. The baron laughs in the great hall, unaware the steward has read his last 3 letters. The lady frets over her gown, unaware her maid found a poem stitched into the hem. The chaplain speaks of virtue, unaware the stable boy saw him leave the lady's chamber barefoot and flushed. The manor holds secrets, the servants carry them, and they do not drop them. A medieval household, even a well-run one, is not a place where everything goes smoothly. It is not a device with perfect parts. It is a living thing, beams and stone and people who forget, who slip, who break things. And when something burns or vanishes, someone must answer for it. Sometimes it is no one's fault. A gust of wind, rain through a bad roof, a rat in the flour, bad luck. A noble house does not run on kindness. It runs on order. When order is shaken, punishment follows. Start small. A gollop tips during supper. The Lord is talking, gesturing grandly, and a young footman, new, nervous, sets a tray down too quickly. The cup goes over. Red wine spreads across white linen. The lady gasps. The steward's mouth tightens. The boy freezes, breathing shallow. The penalty might be light. A day's pay withheld. A sharp word. A day spent scrubbing privy steps with vinegar and a rag. Still, it is remembered. Mistakes keep their shape in this house, especially in the minds of those who count wages and track stains. Now let it be something finer. A silver spoon drops into the fire and melts before it can be snatched out. The spoon was engraved, a wedding gift from the Baron's uncle. No one eats with it. It exists to be there, and now it is not. This is no longer clumsiness, it is carelessness, and carelessness reads as disrespect. The servant is called to the steward's room. He tries to explain. He was tired. He meant no harm. He tried to retrieve it. The steward listens, nods once, writes a line, closes the ledger. No shouting, no scene. The servant is sent to harder work, a week in the outer fields perhaps, or moved out of household service entirely. Ditch crews always need hands. The labor is heavier, the food thinner, and there is no warm hearth at day's end. Worse still is punishment that arrives without words. No one meets your eye. Your tasks become smaller and meaner. You no longer touch fine linen or the ale keys. The steward stops using your name. A week later, a new boy appears. He takes your place at the table. He wears your apron. Your mattress shifts to the coldest corner. One morning you were told your service is no longer needed. You were given half a loaf and shown the door. That is how it ends for many. Then there are greater sins, theft, even small, a strip of bacon, a candle end, a trinket from the lady's chest. If found, it changes the air at once. Penalties vary. A generous lord may toss the thief out with a few coins and a warning. A stricter house or a dearer item brings a beating. Not in fury, not even always in hate, simply because this is what the house expects. It happens in the yard. A short speech about honor and trust, then the strap, a birch rod, a handful of lashes, enough to sting, enough to mark. The youngest servants are made to watch. No one cheers. This is not sport. It is instruction. Sometimes the law is called in. Rarely, but it happens.
Steal a silver goblet, and you may be handed to the reeve or brought before the manorial court. Then it is no longer private. Stocks, branding, a local cell if there is one. That servant does not come back. Wages are kept. Not every ruin comes from wrongdoing. Accidents happen. A scullery girl slips and breaks her wrist. She cannot scrub pots. The cook, short-handed, puts her on onions. She peels poorly. Within a month, she is replaced. An undercook gashes his thigh. He works on, wrapped and limping, until the wound turns. He's sent to the almoner for care. He never quite wins his place back. Another is brought in. The knives keep chopping. A footman repeats something he heard about the wine barrels. He means no insult. It lands as one. The steward says nothing. A week later, the footman is set to cleaning latrines. He never speaks freely again. Or a maid is seen leaving the chaplain's quarters. She says she was delivering laundry. Others smirk. Nothing is proven. Still, she is moved to the outer buildings, colder quarters, heavier work. The point is made. Illness draws suspicion, too. A boy with fever is kept from the bread. Someone else falls sick anyway. The bread is blamed. The boy is sent away. He may live, he may not. He will not return. Death visits without warning. A cook once collapsed into the fire, heart stopping mid-stir. They dragged him out, half burned. The steward arranged a burial. The kitchen was scrubbed. A new cook arrived 3 days later. Life goes on. Servants learn that nothing is certain. One bad step can turn into disgrace. Their names feel written in chalk, not ink, so they become careful, voices low, trays held with both hands, every spoon polished twice, heads bowed, eyes down. And still, caution does not always save you. A girl is accused of stealing lace. She did not. The steward's niece planted it. The girl begs, cries. The lady listens, then shrugs. The girl is dismissed. No one stops her. The niece smiles. The cook sees it. He says nothing. 2 weeks later, the niece finds her shoes gone, her work doubled, her name missing from the ledger. She complains. The steward gives her blank silence. The cook smiles. When justice comes, it comes quietly. So does disgrace. It rolls in like fog. One morning you belong, the next you do not. No one explains. The end of day in a noble house does not fall like a curtain. It arrives like dusk seeping through a crack in the shutters, slow, silent, expected. The manor slows, but it does not stop. It lets out a long breath, and the servants, after hours of bending and polishing and hauling, begin the last rituals. Not rest. There is no rest in service. Closure. Dinner has passed. The great hall, once loud with knives and trenchers, cools toward stillness. Guests drift to chambers. The family lingers in the solar, heavy with meat and wine, their talk thinning like smoke. In the kitchen, the final pots are scoured, not with soap, too dear, but with sand and ash, scraped clean by raw hands and old cloth. The scullery maid, shoulders on fire, mutters as she gouges crusted fat from a spit pan. She has stood since sunrise. Her knees feel borrowed from an old woman. Across the stone floor, the cook gives out tomorrow's orders without even turning his head. He sits with a tankard in hand, eyes half shut, naming needs like a priest naming saints: oats, lard, marrow bones, garlic, barley, goose. Each word is a command. Each forgotten item will cost someone. An undercook scratches the list into wax, trying not to drop the tablet into the coals. He will copy it again at dawn when his hand stops shaking. The fire is banked, never killed. It must smolder through the night. A dead hearth is not just trouble. It is proof of laziness, a stain that spreads. Now the hearth breathes low, reduced to glowing embers, with the occasional sharp pop as pitch releases from an old log. Elsewhere in the manor, its rooms, corridors, and tucked-away corners, the servants begin the day's final motions. A chambermaid lays clean linen at the foot of the lord's bed, smoothing it flat with hands that know the work by feel. She places a sprig of mint on the pillow, not for beauty, but to cover the sour, shut-in air. The lord rarely bathes. Few do. Still, the bed must seem fresh. The lord's chamberlain checks the latch on the wooden chest beside the bed. Inside, belt, rings, a worn prayer book, and a dagger kept for comfort more than use. The chamberlain does not touch the blade. He only makes sure it rests where it should. Down the passage, the lady's maid folds her mistress's gowns into a carved oak coffer, reserved for finer things. Each fold lands clean. The veil goes on top. Pinheads are counted and returned to their pouch. A pin misplaced can be forgiven once, maybe twice. 3 times reads as theft. The lady brushes her hair in slow strokes, half elsewhere. She says nothing. The maid does not press. In time, the brush is offered without a word. The maid takes it, gathers her mistress's hair, unlaces the gown, and helps her into a linen night shift. Then she slides a warmed stone, wrapped in cloth, beneath the blankets, so cold sheets do not punish bare feet. It is intimate work, repeated until it feels ordained by habit. When it is finished, the maid retreats to the mat by the door and sleeps lightly, listening. The servants' quarters are not fully quiet, not yet.
Most lie above the stables or beneath the house itself, stone rooms with a single window too small to crawl through, air that smells of wool, dust, and sometimes regret. A dozen may share one space, men and women apart. Privacy is a privilege, silence is a choice. Some pull off boots and collapse at once. Others whisper into the dark, voices dry with fatigue. Not gossip now. There's no strength left for it, only the last scraps of thought before sleep takes them. A girl counts her remaining thread, trying to mend her one tunic before it gives up. A boy digs at a splinter with a bent needle and a curse. Another writes a letter by candlelight, though he can't read it aloud without stumbling. The oldest servant, a laundress with crooked fingers and one eye turned slightly askew, pulls the blanket up and hums a tune no one recognizes. It isn't for them, it's for the house itself. Labor turned into a thin line of melody. Above, a few remain awake for duty. The night watchman makes his rounds with a lantern and a cudgel, tapping doorposts, checking gates. There is not much to fear from outside. Most danger comes from within. Still, custom rules here, and custom must be obeyed. The chaplain sits in his chamber, reading by firelight. He copies a psalm onto a scrap of vellum. His Latin is rough, his ink running low. He may not finish. He doesn't mind. The steward stays up longer than most. He adds the day's tallies to his ledger. 2 bolts of linen issued to the laundry, 1 bottle of oil spoiled in transit, 3 candles burned to the wick in the great hall. He notes the maid who spilled broth. He marks the kitchen boy who worked beyond his hours. These details matter. They are the bones of the house. At last he sets down the pen, rubs his brow, and drinks from the same cup of ale he began hours ago. Then he locks the ledger and slips the key beneath his pillow. He sleeps too. By now, the manor is still. Only the faint hiss of embers in the kitchen, the creak of beams settling in cold air, the slow breath of bodies too tired to speak. Beneath it all runs a current of obedience. No revolt, no drama. Discipline here is not held by chains, but by rhythm. A servant wakes, works, eats, and sleeps because the pattern is older than any single person. The day ends because it must. The night begins because it always has. In the dark, memory keeps moving. A kitchen maid stares at the ceiling and remembers her brother passing through the village years ago, gone to fight for the earl, wearing boots twice as fine as hers. He didn't know her. A stable boy dreams of horses that speak in low voices. A page dreams of knighthood and wakes with straw in his hair. Some do not dream at all. They lie folded inward like cloth returned to a chest, waiting for the bell, for footsteps overhead, for iron scraping the grate, for light's return, and with it another day of folding, scrubbing, bowing, fetching, and remembering their place. The night asks for nothing grand, only readiness, to light fires before the gentry wake, to empty chamber pots before the first knock, to set the pitcher and bowl just so, to polish the spoon, lace the boot, press the seam, to do what was done yesterday and do it cleaner. This is how the manor survives, not through lords and ladies, but through the ones who labor in silence beneath floorboards and behind wall-cloths, who end each day with aching hands and folded blankets, and rise again as if nothing ever hurt. Good morning. You're awake. Not because you've slept enough, don't be absurd, but because the stone you used as a mattress has stolen the last heat from your body. Also, the cook stepped on you twice. That's the kind of dawn you earn when you were the lowest thing in a medieval household. Welcome to the scullery. You are unpaid, unwashed, and noticed only when something needs cleaning or when someone needs blame. You sleep near the hearth because it is the least cold place in the kitchen. Your bedding is a burlap sack packed with straw that has seen better decades. It smells of burned fat, wet wood, and old failure. Your one garment, a coarse, undyed wool shift, serves as nightclothes and uniform.
It has been boiled in water perhaps twice this year, maybe once, maybe never. You rise before the sun, before the roosters, before it feels like God has blinked. Why? Because everything that must be done before the nobles wake, fire, water, bread, cleaning, will be done by someone, and that someone is usually you. Not only you, in theory. In practice, the others know how to vanish when work appears. You have not learned that art, or you were not born slippery enough. The hearth is dead. The embers went cold in the night. That is bad. A kitchen without fire is a knight without armor, still capable of harm, but mostly pathetic. You shuffle into the courtyard barefoot because your shoes died last spring and were reused as draft stuffing. The flagstones are wet and sharp. You gather kindling with hands too numb to feel splinters. Back inside, you crouch by the hearth and coax flame from damp wood and spite. At last, the fire catches. You hold your fingers over it until they stop looking like a corpse. Next comes water. The manor has no pipes. It has you. You haul bucket after bucket from the well, gallons sloshing, heavy, balanced on a yoke across your thin shoulders. It takes trip after trip. Arms burn, back screams, knees wobble like boiled barley.
Are not even near breakfast, when the kitchen staff begins to filter yawning, stretching, and scratching, are already on your fourth run. No one thanks you. No one even meets your eye. You are furniture that moves. Then the cook arrives like a thunderclap in a sour mood, already sweating, already shouting, armed with a wooden spoon that has been promoted into a weapon. She barks about a stew pot still crusted. That is your signal. You scrub until your knuckles split. No soap, of course. Soap is for the wealthy and the damned. You use ash, sand, and lye when someone remembers to make it. The lye burns, the ash grinds. You've grown something between a callus and a chemical wound on your right hand. The left is worse. The scullery is a punishment dressed up as a room. There is no real air. The window stays clogged with soot. Everything smells like meat boiled too long, and something else you do not name. You spend the day hunched over basins, scraping grease from pewter trenchers, swatting rats off tables with a ladle. Rats run the place, you just work in it. Late morning comes, you still have not eaten. There's a heel of bread in your apron, hidden, dry as chalk. You chew it behind the door, trying not to look guilty. You fail. A kitchen maid sees you, reports you, and now you're on latrine pot duty for the week. Congratulations. Later, you are promoted to onions, which is another way of saying you will cry for 2 hours while you chop. No one asks if you're all right. Everyone assumes you're mourning your life. Around noon, the nobles take their first meal. You carry dishes in, step exactly where you were told, and never meet anyone's eyes. Nobles dislike being reminded that servants have faces and eyes and thoughts. You hold the pitcher for an hour and are never asked to pour. Your arms go numb. That is normal. Afterward, you clean again. Trenchers slick with gravy, bones tossed under the table, half-eaten pies, chewed grapes, something that may once have been fish. You scrape it into the slop bucket. You are not meant to keep scraps. You might take one anyway, just the crust, just the edge, just enough to keep standing. Afternoon smears into evening, more water, more roots, sweeping, mopping. Then you get blamed for the dog vomiting in the solar, a room you have never seen. It doesn't matter. You were guilty by existence. As the sun drops, supper work begins, louder, hotter. The hearth blazes, smoke fills the rafters, a pot falls, the cook screams, a small fire starts, and you slap it out with your apron and keep going. You are allowed to eat again, a shared bowl passed among 5 girls, mostly liquid, a floating root, a grain of barley, a chunk that might be squirrel. You eat it. It is food. Then dinner is served above. You stand nearby again, a shadow at the edge of someone else's pageant. Feet soaked, back locked.
You have spoken only to say yes, cook, sorry, cook, it won't happen again, cook, whether or not you know what it was. Night comes, dishes again, scrubbing again, bones stuck to pans like mortar. Your hands shake now, not from cold, from sheer exhaustion. At last, you are dismissed with a grunt. You crawl back to your sack by the hearth. The fire has sunk to embers. Your clothes are damp. You smell of smoke and onions and fatigue. Someone is already asleep beside you. Someone else is crying quietly. You don't ask who. You don't want to know. You lie there, not asleep, not fully awake, or dismissed with a grunt. You crawl back to your sack by the hearth. The fire has sunk to embers. Your clothes are damp. You smell of smoke and onions and fatigue. Someone is already asleep beside you. Someone else is crying quietly. You don't ask who. You don't want to know. You lie there, not asleep, not fully awake, and think of what came before. You did not choose this. No one chooses to be scullery. You were born into it. Your mother worked the dairy until her back failed. Your aunt did laundry until fever took her from the river water. Now it's your turn, suffering passed down like a ladle. There is no clear path upward. You do not become a cook. You do not marry the steward. You do not drift into a lady's chamber and learn embroidery by soft candlelight. That is a story people tell themselves. You grow older. Your hands split deeper. One day you are too slow, and they replace you with someone younger, cheaper, less likely to fall asleep standing. So you learn the real craft, survival in small rules. Never correct the cook, share the driest bread with the girl who is bleeding, stay out of the steward's path. If you hear noble footsteps behind you, move at once, before you're trampled in body or standing. There is gossip. Of course there is. It is the only currency servants mint. Someone swears the chamberlain beds the lady-in-waiting. Someone claims he loves the choir boy. Someone saw the red-bearded knight eat 5 figs and vomit into his own helmet. That one is likely true. When there is a wedding or feast, the house becomes a storm. 3 times the guests, 10 times the work, no time for anything but frantic scrubbing and silent prayer. Nobles celebrate, you blister. By the end, you are not even tired. You are hollow. Winter is worse. You work through cough and fever. You wear the same shift for weeks, layered with scraps. Some days the water in your bucket freezes before you return. You keep going, because if you stop, someone takes your place. And because you have been taught that suffering without complaint is virtue, especially for girls like you. You used to have a name. People once said it. Now you are girl or you. You are not a hero, not special, just another unseen gear in the household's grind. And still, the manor runs because of you, because you rise before the sun, because you know how to quiet a hinge with goose fat, because you know which bucket is clean and which holds mop water, because you scrub pans until they shine like coins you will never touch. No statue will be raised, no song will carry your name. Yet if you vanished tomorrow, the kitchen would begin to fail within days. You don't sleep well. You twitch, you ache. Dreams come strange and thin. Green fields, boats slipping away, blankness. You wake with a dry mouth and arms that feel made of stone. Another day begins, another day like the last. No one notices, except maybe Lord Crumbs. You are the spit boy. Congratulations, or condolences. It depends on how you feel about spending your childhood turning slowly in front of open flame while you study the shape of your life. You are 8 or 10 or 12, small enough to crouch by the hearth, old enough not to cry every time you burn yourself. You were orphaned, sold, or handed over by parents who called it an opportunity. Your job is simple. Sit on a stool, if you're lucky enough to have one, beside the great kitchen hearth and turn the spit all day. Slow, steady, mostly clockwise, until someone tells you otherwise. Sometimes you're told you're turning too fast, then too slow, then, most absurd of all, that you're turning with proper dignity. Once someone called you cheeky because you blink too often.
The heat is relentless, not ordinary heat, not the warmth of a sunlit room, but the kind that feels wrong, like you've been shut inside a loaf while it bakes. Your cheeks stay flushed, your hair stays damp, your tunic, singed along the hem, reeks of every animal that has ever passed through this hearth. You used to like the smell of roasting duck, now it gives you a pounding headache.
Head. Burns are constant. Blisters bloom and split. The kitchen offers no pity. You are expected to learn, to dodge, to endure. Palm blister? Wrap it in a rag. Eyebrows singed off? Grow new ones. If you faint, try to fall where you won't spill anything. You don't get rests. The meat does not care that your arms tremble. The fire does not care that sweat runs into your eyes. The nobles expect their goose to turn at the right pace, at the right angle. If it comes out wrong, someone pays. Metaphorically, people say, until they don't. On feast days, the spit grows longer. Bigger birds, whole pigs, once an entire deer. It took 2 of you to turn it. Your partner had a lazy eye and a mean streak. He would let go of the crank at random just to watch you jolt, scrambling to keep the meat from dropping. You haven't seen him lately. Word is he's been sent to the kennels. You hope the dogs treat him with fairness he never offered you. Hours pass in the same posture, knees numb, back knotted. Once your foot fell asleep so hard you thought you'd gone lame. The steward called you dramatic and threw a turnip at your head. All around you the kitchen churns, shouting, boiling, clanging, bodies colliding with trays and jugs. You are the still point. No one thanks you, no one remembers you. Yet if that roast comes out uneven, everyone will remember the boy who turned it. When the meat is declared done, you help slide it off the spit. Carefully. Fat hisses, grease drips. If you flinch, you're scolded. If you pause, you're slapped. Then comes the next roast, or stew, or pies, or the big pot that smells like onions gone wrong and something worse. You do not know the hour. Your life is firelight and hunger. Sometimes, if luck favors you, someone tosses you a bone, a real one, half gnawed, with just enough meat left to pretend you had a meal. You crouch in a corner and eat with hands curled like an animal's paws. Then you go back to turning. By late afternoon, your face is raw with heat, lips cracked, hands black with soot. Smoke has lived in your chest so long you cough like a man 4 times your age. You hear plates clatter and laughter rise from the hall above. You will never set foot there. That room is clean and bright, full of soft chairs and white bread. You exist so they can pretend the world runs without effort. When the feasting ends, your work does not. You carry trays of half-eaten meat down to the kitchen. You don't eat it, you haul it. You scrape bones into the slop bucket, rinse goblets, drag the spit to the scullery for cleaning. It's heavy. Your shoulder throbs. A blister bursts under your palm, and you pretend you didn't feel it. Someone shouts that the Lord wants a roast for his hounds. You start again. The dogs will eat better than you tonight. Again. It is late. Your tunic sticks to your skin, hair stiff with grease, hands shaking not only from fatigue, but from hunger that has turned sharp. At last you get pottage, thin grain water with a few soft turnips. You swallow it in the corner. No one talks. Everyone is too tired to act human. Then you clean. Dull knives, hooks, the spit. Everything must look right before the steward makes his rounds. If he finds a smear of fat, you may be made to scrub it with your own spit. If he's in the wrong mood, you'll be sent to floor duty in the Lord's privy the next day. Night settles like smoke. The kitchen quiets. Pots clink into place. The cook stops shouting, at least for a while. You sit near the dying fire, too sore to lie down, too wound tight to sleep. A rat slips past your foot. You don't even move. You think about before the manor. Maybe you were a shepherd's son. Maybe your parents ran a mill. Maybe they still do. Maybe they forgot you. Or maybe they were simply starving and you were one mouth too many. There is no clean way out. The best you can hope for is that your burns heal without infection and that your spine doesn't twist too early. If luck holds, you might become an assistant cook by 20.
if you live that long. Winter makes everything worse. The walls are thick, but the draft still slices through. Your station by the hearth should be a gift: light, warmth, fire. Instead, it is exposure. One side of you roasts while the other freezes. You turn like the meat, a boy on a spit, browned on one side, numb on the other. You have no proper shoes. You wrap your feet in scraps and try not to step into puddles. When you walk, your knees click like old hinges. When you crouch, you wonder if you'll rise again. Some days your fingers are so stiff, burned and frozen at once, you can't tell if you're holding the crank or if it's holding you. Health is not something you possess. Your cough becomes part of your name. Your skin peels from heat rash, then splits from dry cold. You smell of scorched fat, which sounds tempting until you've lived inside it. People avoid you. You've burned the same forearm so many times it looks like meat overcooked. No balm, no salve. The apothecary serves the family. You are told to rub it with pig lard and keep turning. Kitchen rank is strict. You are beneath the kitchen maids, beneath the butcher's helper, beneath the boy who fetches eggs. You are lowest. Even the dog begging for bones sits above you. It gets scraps. Once in a while, the steward nods at you. That is the high point of your week. You wonder rarely, but truly, what life would look like if you left. Then you remember, spit boys don't leave. They become other kinds of servants, or they don't grow up. So you fold yourself beside the hearth again, legs tucked, arms wrapped around your knees. The flames have lowered, but yesterday's blisters still burn where they cracked open. You stare into the coals and try to imagine warmth that doesn't hurt. You cannot. You've never known it. Outside, snow falls. Inside, meat sizzles. Between them, unseen, unmissed, you keep turning, because that is what you do. Hall only. Everyone else gets the cheap stuff that carries a faint sheepy bite. You move room to room and train your eyes on what doesn't fit. That's your second duty, to notice. If the salt cellar sits low, you mark it. If the wine stock is 2 casks short, you start asking questions. If the guest pot is full, you find someone else to handle it. Delegation is the only gift this place gives, and it always falls downhill. The chamberlain is awake already. Of course he is. He seems built for wakefulness. Narrow frame, sharp nose, sharper standards. His robes stay clean as if dirt has learned to fear him. He knows when you've made an error, sometimes before you've even managed it. He speaks in lists. 2 bolts of wool broadcloth, 4 barrels of lamp oil, 1 visiting friar with food demands that brush the edge of heresy. You nod, scratch it down, and try not to spill ink. The last time you did, he made you recopy a month's ledger by candlelight, while the steward watched and chewed pickled herring close enough that you could taste it. Your role is part clerk, part courier, part sacrifice. When linen vanishes, it's your fault. When the firewood arrives damp, your fault. When the Lord's hunting dog relieves itself in the guest stairwell, somehow still your fault. Late morning brings inspections. You trail the chamberlain through halls and chambers like a quiet shadow with a stylus. He taps a wall, lifts a coverlet.
Tastes a wine, sniffs the rushes. You nod. You record. You swallow your sighs. Once, you yawned without thinking. The rest of the day you sorted dried peas by size and color until your eyes felt full of sand. You envy no one here, except the cook's dog, who at least can bark without punishment. Lunch is not rest, it's logistics with teeth. Who eats what, when, where? And who must sit 2 places away from whom so no one restarts a blood feud over pigeon pie? You carry seating charts, titles that must not be bungled, and soft reminders that Lady Cressida still refuses to speak to Lord Alrich since the Lent wine incident. After the meal, accounts. You sit across from the chamberlain in the solar and read each line aloud, as if reciting a prayer you don't believe in. Wax, fish, salt, horseshoes, ink, wool, barley, mead, soap,
barley again. The list never ends. Now and then he asks for the weight of a cask, or how many loaves can be cut from a stone of flour. If you pause, he lifts one eyebrow. You would rather be struck. Then come visitors, nobles from a neighboring estate, a wandering knight, a distant cousin who always arrives between holdings, as if that's a real place. They bring trunks, pride, and food needs. You show them to their rooms and note which linens they receive, not because anyone will praise you, but because someone will blame you the moment a sheet goes missing. Keys are another burden, not truly yours, not in the sense of owning them, but you fetch them. The armory key, the wine cellar key, the upstairs wardrobe key that seems to fit nothing and still matters. You keep them in a pouch cinched tight at your belt and touch them without thinking, the way a nervous man touches prayer beads. Lose them, and you won't just be scolded, you'll be ruined. A beating, exile, something worse, permanent latrine work. By late afternoon, the day is nothing but problems dressed as errands. A shipment of salted herring is late, a bolt of velvet has vanished, a priest drank too much and sleeps on the chapel floor. The kitchen is out of vinegar, the stables need more hay. The steward has opinions. You listen. You nod. You draft the reply in the chamberlain's hand, polite, cold, and neat. Sometimes you write love letters, too. Yes, truly. A noblewoman insists on speaking only through ink. She dictates from behind a curtain while feeding her lapdog strawberries dipped in cream. You write what she says, take the wildness out of it, seal it in wax, and deliver it to a knight who blushes like an oven each time he breaks the seal. Evening comes, candles again. You walk the halls with a taper and a snuffer, relighting what has died, trimming what has burned too low. The corridors soften into hush. The nobles drink, the servants breathe. You stand between worlds, invited to neither, needed by both. You check the guest rooms once more, rushes fluffed, curtains straight, no one dead, no wine spilled, no one fled with a lover without the proper notes recorded. Your feet throb, your head pounds, fingers stained with wax and ink. You haven't eaten since morning, but you won't eat until the chamberlain finishes supper and dismisses you. Sometimes he forgets. You sit outside his door for an hour while he tells stories from his youth to a page boy trying to look interested, likely dreaming of armor and horses. You doze with your chin in your palm, stomach hollowing out. At last the door opens. He flicks 2 fingers. Dismissed. You bow, murmur thanks, and retreat to the servants' quarters. Your bunk is narrow. The fire is dead. Someone has stolen your blanket again. You lie down, still half-dressed, and stare at the ceiling. You wonder if this is what power smells like. Tallow, ink, sweat, lavender. You once thought serving close to nobles would be thrilling, that you'd hear secrets, learn how authority works. You have heard secrets, all right, mostly about sore bodies, stolen pastries, and who finds whom unbearable. As for authority, it is only more rules, more ways to fail. The chamberlain calls it discipline. What you learn is exhaustion. You learn how to be visible and ignored at once, present and forgotten, needed and treated like a spare tool. There is talk of promotion. Maybe one day you'll assist the steward. Maybe you'll manage the accounts. More likely, you'll keep doing this until your back gives out or your eyes go dim from reading numbers by candlelight. There is no pension here, only a slower decline. And still you rise each morning because your hands keep the chaos stitched together, because the castle does not stand without you, because someone has to make sure the salt stock matches the winter ration plan, because if you stop, someone will notice, and noticing rarely ends well. You fall asleep counting barrels. You dream in tallies. You wake to the first bell while it is still dark, stretch aching legs, adjust squeaking shoes, and begin again. Candles first. Always candles.
The other servants barely tolerate you. You are no longer one of them. You wear cleaner clothes. You use words like allocation and inventory. Still, you are not noble either. They forget your name as you light their hearths and refill their ink. You exist in the middle, proof that power drips downward and blame rushes uphill. And you keep showing up, because showing up is what keeps the place upright. Tomorrow will look like today. You will carry lists, count candles, and be blamed for whatever goes wrong. Your day begins in a barn that never sleeps. The horses stir before sunrise, blowing clouds of steam into cold air, hooves knocking softly against stalls layered in straw and rat droppings. You are the stable boy, which means you shovel, brush, haul, and get kicked. Not often, but often enough to remember. Mostly you apologize to animals that outrank you in both grace and diet. You sleep in the loft above the stable, if sleep is the word. The boards are thin. The horses below never stop shifting. You hear everything, tails swishing, hooves stamping, the unmistakable sound of something large relieving itself too close to your head. Your hands are cracked before dawn. You pull on stiff boots and a tunic that smells permanently of sweat and leather, then climb down the ladder. The cold hits like a slap from God. Mucking comes first, stall by stall. Shovel, pitch, shovel again. It must be done before the master of horse arrives, or you'll spend the morning nursing a split lip while being lectured on discipline. You work fast, but not fast enough to spook the animals. Spooked horses are worse than angry nobles. They bite, they rear, they crush. You've broken 2 fingers already. Once a hoof caught your ribs and left you coughing blood for a week. Still you love them. They do not lie, they do not shout, they do not pretend to be better than you. The stable smells of hay, manure, sweat, and horse, somehow worse and better than anything inside the manor. You don't notice anymore. You can tell a healthy stallion a scent alone. You can hear colic in a horse's breathing before anyone else sees it. After the stalls comes for feed. Heavy sacks of oats, hay bales stacked high. You lower them one by one, careful not to twist wrong like last winter. You nearly fainted then. The master said you were faking and threw a bridle at your head. Feeding is delicate. Some horses bolt their food, some shy away, some bite if you move too
quickly. You've got scars to show for it. You pat necks, check hooves, whisper nonsense. They know your voice. They trust it. Mid-morning is grooming, brushing, currying, cleaning hooves, untangling manes, plucking burrs, wiping noses, scooping more dung than you can count. If the Lord rides, you polish tack until it shines. Not for him, for the master of horse. If something is wrong, it is your skin, not the saddle, that pays. Sometimes hunting dogs invade the stable, nervous, loud creatures with more lineage than sense. You clean after them, too. No one thanks you. When the Lord decides to ride, and it is always last, the stable turns frantic. You saddle his favorite gelding, the one that hates being touched. You check straps 3 times. You wipe the bit. You set the stirrups exactly as he prefers. Too short, because fashion never learned anything. You step aside while he mounts. If the horse shifts, it's your fault. If he slips, your fault. If he breaks a nail, somehow still your fault. You will hear about it for weeks. Between tasks, you fetch water, sweep the yard, stack more hay. Leather and sweat cling to you. Shoulders ache. Muscles throb you didn't know existed. You bleed quietly. You get breaks sometimes, but they're not restful. You sit on a stool, sip warm ale, and stare at dust drifting through sunlight like tired spirits. You don't talk. Your jaw hurts from clenching. Winter is cruel. Fingers numb inside gloves. Troughs freeze. Horses breathe steam like dragons. You smash ice with a hammer to give them water and wonder if anyone inside the manor knows the stable has no insulation. Summer is no mercy either. Sweat soaks through everything.
Evening brings flies and black clouds. You swat them half-heartedly while cleaning one last stall. An older mare soils her bedding again. She's anxious. Bad weather is coming. You feel it in your joints before the sky shifts. You sweep again, rake again, scrub troughs with straw and a brush that lost its bristles years ago. No one replaces it. The master of horse inspects. If he's pleased, he grunts. If not, he shouts. You measure your day by how far his voice is from your face. You steal carrots from the feed room, one for the gray mare who never bites, one for the chestnut who bites only strangers. They nuzzle your hand, soft noses, warm breath. It's the closest thing to kindness you get. At night, you climb back to the loft. Your bed is rags and straw, smelling of mildew and saddle oil. You don't undress. There's no point. You'll be up in 5 hours. You listen to horses breathing, to wind pressing through slats. You dream in hoofbeats. No one at court knows your name. They call you boy, though you're nearly 17, and your back creaks like a drawbridge. When you pass in halls, noses wrinkled, not from rudeness, but from the life clinging to you. Still, some notice. A kitchen maid slips you crusts. The blacksmith nods. Once a knight gave you a silver coin because you calmed his stallion before battle. You still have it. You don't spend it. It proves you exist. You know there is no ladder from stable boy to steward, no horse brush that becomes a sword. You will not be a knight, not even a squire. But you know animals. You know how to wrap a wound, calm a frightened foal, spot a lame leg early. That counts for something. You've seen what happens to boys who can't bear it. They leave, they break, or they vanish after a whipping. No one asks. So you work. You keep quiet. In storms, the roof leaks. In summer, the hay rots. In winter, your breath freezes on the beams. Still, the horses wait, breathing, trusting. Most days, that is enough. You stay not for praise, there isn't any, but because the horses know your step. They lift their heads when they hear your boots. In a world of orders and lies, this is the one place you are trusted. Not for rank, not for words, for how you move, how you listen. You wake with a paw in your mouth again. It belongs to a turnspit dog, short-legged, long-bodied, sad-eyed. He looks like a sausage that has known disappointment. He sprawls across your straw pallet, snoring, fur matted with grease and what might be duck fat. You don't mind. He's warm, and honestly, he smells better than most people you work with. You are the turnspit dog keeper, which means you are the invisible, overworked hinge between noble meals and an animal treadmill. The dogs run, the spit turns, the meat cooks. Someone has to make sure the dogs don't collapse, bite, or simply give up halfway through a roast. That someone is you. Your shift begins before them. Boiling wool ruins it, and ruined wool ruins lives. You kneel by the tubs and begin scrubbing. Soap is a luxury. You use lye, water, elbow grease, and resignation. The lye bites immediately, seeping into cracks in your skin you didn't know were there. Your knuckles sting, then burn, then go numb. That's when you know you can keep going. You scrub collars first, always collars. Sweat and oil collect there, stiffening the fabric into something closer to bark than cloth. You rub until the fibers soften, or your hands, whichever comes first. Steam rises as the water reaches a boil. You plunge linens in with a stick, stirring carefully so nothing sticks to the copper. The smell is sharp and acrid, ash and old sweat, and something sour that never quite leaves. Your eyes water. You blink it away and keep working. Once boiled, the linens are hauled out, heavy, scalding, dripping, and carried to the rinse tubs. Cold water this time, brutal water. It steals your breath when it splashes your wrists. You rinse and rinse, rinse and rinse, twisting fabric until your shoulders scream. The water turns gray, then clearer. Not clean, never truly clean, but clean enough to be returned upstairs without comment. You hang the linens on ropes strung across the yard. Shirts, shifts, sheets, tablecloths fluttering pale and limp in the early light. In winter they freeze stiff. In summer they dry too fast and must be beaten smooth with paddles.
Today it's damp. You'll be returning by noon. Mid-morning brings more, always more. Bedclothes from the guest wing, napkins from last night's supper, a chemise dropped into the basket with no note, no name, just the faint smell of rose water and something medicinal. You don't ask, you never ask. Asking invites attention. Your back aches constantly now, a deep, dull pain like something misaligned inside you. You breathe through it. There's no time to sit. When the linens are dry enough, you carry them inside to be pressed, not with irons, which are heavy and rare, but with smooth stones heated near the fire. You press, lift, smooth, repeat. Each fold must be exact. A crooked hem is noticed, a wrinkle is remembered. Someone passes and comments that the linen smells a bit sharp. You apologize immediately. It's safer. They move on, satisfied. You exhale only after they're gone. You eat standing, if you eat at all, a crust of bread tucked into your apron, a sip of ale when no one's looking. Your stomach growls and you ignore it. Hunger is quieter than trouble. By afternoon, your hands are trembling. The lie has eaten into your nails again. The skin along your wrists is red and raw. You wrap them in scraps of cloth and keep going. There are still
Shifts to mend, hems to check, buttons to replace. You stitch by the light of a narrow window, squinting, careful not to prick yourself. Blood stains linen worse than wine. When evening comes, the last of the laundry is folded and stacked. You carry it upstairs carefully, arms full, eyes lowered. A lady inspects one piece, then another. She nods once. No praise. That's good. Praise invites expectation. You return to the yard to dump the gray water far from the well. The ground steams faintly where it hits. You rinse the tubs, scrape ash from the pot, bank the fire for tomorrow. There is always tomorrow. At night, you sleep with your hands wrapped and your muscles humming with pain. You dream of water that doesn't burn, of cloth that stays clean, of hands that belong to someone else. You wake before dawn again because the linen will be dirty, because the water will be cold, because the house expects to be clean without ever seeing the cost. And so you rise, aching and anonymous, and make the world above you white again. Mucked the stall, who stood in the cold whispering nonsense to a frightened animal so a lord could look brave for an hour. You've learned that survival here isn't about glory. It's about continuity. You finish your rounds as the light drains from the yard. The stable doors are barred. The lanterns are hung high enough that curious noses can't knock them loose. You pause at each stall, the way you always do, counting breaths without realizing you're counting. Smoke leans into the rail when you pass. Willow sighs and settles her weight. Gore snaps once, lazily, more habit than threat. You know the difference now. Only then do you climb back up to the loft. Your boots come off with effort. Your feet throb as the blood returns, pins and needles flaring sharp enough to make you hiss. You rub them once, briefly, and stop. If you linger on pain, it grows ideas. Better to ignore it. You eat what you've got, a scrap of cheese earned by holding a nervous mare steady while the farrier worked. Onion bread is so hard it nearly defeats your teeth. You chew slowly, not because it tastes good, but because chewing is proof you still can. The straw beneath you crackles as you shift, and for a moment you just lie there, staring at the dark rafters, listening. Below you, the horses breathe. It's a deep, steady sound, warm, alive. It seeps into your bones better than any blanket. Outside, torchlight flickers against stone. Somewhere in the manor, a voice rises in laughter, another in song. A lute string trembles, faint and thin, as if it doesn't quite belong to this world. You don't resent it. That surprises you sometimes. You think about how stories are told, about battles and banners and bloodlines, about knights whose names are remembered and lords whose portraits hang in halls. No one sings about the boy who noticed a loose strap in the dark.
No one writes verses about the hands that steadied a panicking animal or cleaned a wound before it festered. But the horse remembers. Tomorrow, Smoke will lean into your touch again. Willow will lower her head when she hears your boots. Even Gore, foul-tempered beast that he is, will tolerate you in his space. That trust wasn't given. It was earned one quiet, unremarkable day at a time. You stretch carefully. Your knees complain. Your back answers with a dull ache that will be there when you wake. You accept it the way you accept the weather. You lie back fully now, arms folded beneath your head, straw poking through your hair. The smell of hay, leather, and animals clings to you. It's not pleasant exactly, but it's honest. You close your eyes. Tomorrow will come early. There will be stalls to muck, hooves to check, water to haul, and tempers to avoid. Someone will shout. Someone will forget your name. Someone will assume the work simply happens. And it will, because you'll be there, because the horses will need you, because even in a place built on orders and noise and punishment, there is still this, a quiet agreement between a boy and a stable full of living things that trust him to show up again. That's enough. You fall asleep to the sound of hooves shifting in straw, already counting the hours not until escape, but until morning. The tallow candle trembles, throwing long, thin shadows across the stone. You begin with the nursery. 2 noble children sleep beneath heavy embroidered quilts, breathing unevenly, faces flushed with half-dreams and lingering warmth. You don't know their names. You know when their fevers rise. You know which one wets the bed. You smooth a blanket, adjust it just enough, and leave without a sound. Next comes the hall of tapestries. Woven battles scare back at you. Blood, banners, raised swords, frozen glory. Your flame glides over glassy eyes and stitched steel. Something creaks behind you. You do not turn. Fear is not part of your wage. You keep walking. The library follows, locked as it should be. You test the handle anyway, firm. Last time it was left ajar, rats chewed a corner from a manuscript, and the steward spoke of nothing else for days. You move on. The chapel lies still. One votive candle burns low at the altar. You snuff it gently, not from disrespect, but care. Last winter, an ember nearly caught the hangings. You touch the iron holder to be sure it's cold, then continue. Up the narrow stair you climb, lantern raised. Your legs ache. It's your 3rd circuit of the night, and the castle stretches farther after midnight. You walk with purpose, neither rushed nor slow. Your ears stay open. You hear wood settling, mice skittering, water dripping somewhere deep in the stone. You know these sounds. You know what belongs. In the east wing, a window stands open. That is wrong. You set the lantern down and close it softly. No report. The steward does not believe in ghosts. You do. The laundry room comes next. Linens, once steaming, now hang stiff with cold. You pull one free, a noble's cloak. The hem is singed, left too close to a wall torch. You sigh, fold it under your arm, and keep going. You will mend it before dawn, when the fire is low and your hands shake from weariness. The kitchen corridor smells faintly of onions. A pot still steams on the hearth. You lift the lid. Thin broth. You dip a crust of bread, careful to take little, enough to remind yourself you are human. You do not eat with the others. You are not on their hours. No one saves you a plate, but you know where a shriveled apple might hide. The cook pretends not to notice. Perhaps she once walked these halls too. You stop at the stair to the Lord's Solar. You do not climb it. That world lives above. Featherbeds, warm slippers, voices that command. You watch it only from below. Near the servants' dormitory, a baby cries. You knock softly. A mother opens the door, eyes heavy. You hand her a flask of warm water. She nods. No words are needed. At night, the castle feels alive, not haunted, weighted,
Every stone has held 1,000 lives. You don't feel small. You feel linked. That's what keeps you moving. Your final round comes just before dawn. The candle stub gives little light now. You coax what you can from it. Shadows dance along the walls. In the lower storage rooms, you watch for sparks and rats. Fire here would eat everything. The armory door stands ajar. Your heart
quickens. You step inside with only keys and breath. Racks stand full, blades accounted for, no one there. A draft, perhaps. You shut the door and slide the bolt home. Back by the kitchen hearth, you finally sit. You unwrap the cloak and take out the needle and thread. Your stitches are slow, careful, familiar. The bells begin to toll for morning prayer just as you finish. The castle stirs, groans, footsteps. Another day begins. You return the cloak to its peg and climb to your narrow cot above the linen stores. You curl in on yourself like a letter never opened and sleep as the castle breathes around you. Sometimes the night blurs. The walls seem to breathe. You carry salt in your apron, not for food, but protection. The old cook said evil things dislikes it. You've never tested that, but the salt stays. There is a patch of stone in the east corridor that never warms. You step over it every time. No one speaks of it. You see things. A nobleman's mistress slipping through shadows. The steward pocketed chapel candles in winter. You say nothing. Silence has weight here. Once, after that look between you, a thick blanket appeared on your cot. No words, no thanks. This is how trade works. In the quiet hour before birds stir, you pause beneath the great window. You lift the lantern and look up. Stars are cold, distant, and unchanged. Your mother used to say the night listened to women who worked while others slept. You've whispered your wishes into it. None answered. Still, the watching comforts you. You move on. Same halls, same locks, same shadows, because someone must. And tonight, as always, that someone is you. They told me I came into the world on a cold morning in late November, though calendars mattered little in the village. My mother birthed me on straw by the hearth, while my eldest sister fed dung to the fire, and my father muttered about another mouth. My third sister cut the cord with a cheese knife. I was wrapped in rags from a cousin who died young, as many did. No one named me at first. Too risky. Too many babies never lasted. The churchyard held small, soft graves without markers. They waited until I survived my first fever. Then Father Oswin baptized me in a cold font that smelled of mildew and wool. I was named Thomas, after an uncle who was kicked to death by a mule. My first bed was a wooden cradle stuffed with hay, set near the fire, if there was one. Our house was timber and mud, roofed with thatch that leaked more often than not. The floor was earth. Chickens wandered freely. A pig slept near my cradle for warmth. We had no chimney, only a hole in the roof, and hoped the smoke would rise instead of linger. It wasn't dramatic, it was life. It didn't. Everything reeked of smoke. Clothes, hair, skin, smoke that sank deep and stayed, the kind that settles into bone and never quite leaves. As a baby, I was lucky to have milk. Some weren't. Wet nurses were for people with means. Most mothers fed their own if they could. Mine did, even with 5 other mouths crying and a winter pot of thin porridge that barely warmed the spoon. Weaning came early. Mashed peas, soft barley, bread soaked in broth. Teeth followed. Illness came first. I had 4 older siblings, 2 younger, and 1 I never met. He died one night near Candlemas, still warm when they found him, wrapped tight. We didn't talk about it. No one had to. By the time I could walk, I worked. Childhood, as people like to picture it now, didn't exist. No toys, no lessons, no quiet hours spent thinking about yourself.
My days were chasing chickens, hauling water from a stream that might hold a dead squirrel, and getting smacked with a spoon for standing where I shouldn't. We shared everything: beds, shoes, sickness. My sister and I wore the same tunic on alternating weeks. It never fully dried. Lice were normal, fleas expected, worms only worth mention if you coughed one up. By 6 or 7, you were useful. That was the mark. I mucked stalls, scared crows, carried baskets of turnips so heavy I couldn't see past them. My hands hardened before I ever held a quill. Not that I would. Some children were sent to towns or monasteries. I was not. The fields had me, the same way they had my father and his father before him, back when people still looked to the coast and wondered if longships might appear. Life followed the seasons. Spring meant sweat, summer meant tending, autumn meant harvest, winter meant staying alive. Simple. Still, you noticed things: how the village held its breath during births, how people crossed themselves when smoke rose thin from a neighbor's roof, how old men watched the horizon like it might answer them back. Sometimes it did. We played, because children always do. Sticks became swords, straw turned into armor. We raced, fought, laughed, and bled over apples. Then the work called again. Always work. When Father Oswin wasn't watching, we slipped into the chapel, cold stone under our hands, candlelight, a place where mud didn't cling. I didn't know Latin. I knew silence. I knew how rare it was. There was a boy named Will down the lane. He said 3 crows before breakfast meant a death by sundown. We believed him. Superstition wasn't a hobby. It kept you steady. Saints guarded animals. Relics healed boils. Dreams warned you, especially the ones with fire. My schooling was spoken. Stories, prayers, curses. I learned when to plant, how to spot a snake, and stepping into church with the wrong foot meant trouble. These lessons mattered. Letters could wait. Still, there were good moments. Barley high in the sun, ale strong enough to loosen laughter, feasts where the whole village gathered, small as they were. Someone played a fiddle. Someone told a story so fine even the pigs paused. That was childhood. Hunger and noise, pain and brief joy. We were dirty, often cold, rarely full, alive. I can still smell the hearth smoke, feel straw through thin bedding, hear my mother humming at night, the same tune every time, soft, wordless, a lullaby made of endurance. They say early years shape a man. If so, I was shaped by mud and ash, by my name being called for chores, by learning that nothing, warmth, food, care, came without work. I lived. That alone put me ahead of many. My first clear memory is a splinter, small, mean. I fell on the threshing floor chasing a chicken and cried like the world had ended. My mother pulled it out with her teeth and handed me a crust of bread hard enough to crack a tooth. That was comfort, pain removed, food given. In our time, childhood was not guarded. It was a short, dirty road to fatigue. You learned by watching and doing, by mistakes, by the ladle when needed. I don't recall a life without labor. By 5, I carried water. By 6, I fed birds. By 7, I learned not to stand where oxen stepped. We called that learning. It kept you breathing. Days began before the sun. Harvest woke us with boots slamming doors. Breakfast was cold porridge, or bread if rats hadn't found it. No one asked about sleep. The day didn't care. We owned nothing meant for play. A stick could be anything. Stones served many uses. We played with one ear open, waiting for our names. Hearing your full name meant trouble. School
was not for us. If you learned anything extra, it came from a priest between burials or an old man who knew which mushroom spared you. I scratched the first letter of my name in dirt once. That was enough. What I learned fast was how to live, how to walk behind a plow, how to lift right, how to keep quiet during sermons, how to look innocent when apples went missing. Religion came early.
Fear came first. Hell was easy to imagine, the devil too. God was harder, painted in fire and silence. We nodded and crossed ourselves. Around 7, the tone changed. You were no longer small. You were just young. Chores grew heavier. Girls washed and spun. Boys worked fields and beasts. Some did both. My father said hands should blister by 8. Mine did. By then I'd crushed a toe, lost nails, and been kicked by a cow with no patience for boys. That was childhood. We lived outside. Rain, frost, heat. The work didn't wait. I knew every stone on the path, every crack in the gate, every wormhole by the fire. The earth was our floor and our food and half our sickness. Illness was common. Fevers, rashes, coughs. You got better or you didn't. The midwife knew herbs. She tried. If not, the bell rang. And still we rose the next day, because that was the rule. If the sickness was bad, your best hope was prayer or luck, or both working together. Death was never an idea, it was a presence. I watched a friend of mine, Sinan, go from laughing at a beetle in the dirt to shaking under a blanket to being buried behind the chapel, all in 3 days. No one explained it. They simply said God took him, and that was the end of it. You moved on because you had to. Still, there was joy in odd corners. We played in the stream, threw snow and straw at one another, raced barefoot through the fields, yelping when we stepped on thorns or startled a frog into leaping at our feet. We stole turnips and ran from the tanner, who claimed they were his. At night, we crowded close to the fire and listened to the old men talk, stories of beasts, saints, and wars so distant they might as well have been dreams. We didn't understand them, but we loved them all the same. There was a rhythm to life. You rose, you worked, you ate, you scratched, you slept, you dreamed, usually of simple things, better shoes, a tunic that didn't itch. And even as a child, you knew what waited for you. You'd grow taller, though never as tall as the Lord's Son. You'd grow strong enough to lift heavier loads. You'd marry someone from the same village, someone with the same dirt under her nails. You'd have children who would work as you did, and you'd die within a mile of where you were born. No one ever said this aloud, but it was there in the way people measured you against the doorframe and nodded, as if thinking, soon enough. Childhood wasn't about wonder. It was about waiting, waiting to be useful, waiting to matter. Feast days were the exception. Saints' days and weddings brought food, music, even dancing. Once I ate a honeyed oat cake I still remember. Another year they roasted a whole pig. It felt like a miracle. Meat that wasn't dried or boiled or suspicious. We ran wild that night, bellies full, hearts light, and for a moment it felt like the village belonged to us children, like the future might hold something other than more of the same. Then morning came, chores returned, wood on your back, the sour stink of sheep, the clang of the pail against the well wall, back into the rhythm. By 10, I could drive a cart, gut a fish, twist rope and mend a fence. I could smell rain on the wind and judge my father's mood by how he shut the door. I was nearly grown in every way that mattered. At 12, you were no longer considered a child, not by the village, not by the church, not by your own bones. You were a working man, just a smaller one. Childhood ended without ceremony, no speeches, no blessing, just a longer list of tasks, and the quiet understanding that the only difference between you and your father now was how much your back hurt. I survived those years. I didn't freeze. I didn't fall into the well. I wasn't crushed beneath oxen or carts. I reached the point where people stopped calling me boy and started asking me to carry heavier things. In medieval England, that counted as success. By 13, I'd stopped asking questions and started growing blisters instead. That was the age when a boy stopped being a boy.
One day you were helping in the fields, the next you were there from sunrise to sundown, stomach growling, back bent, eyes stinging from wind and smoke. My voice cracked like damp rafters, and the older men noticed. They spoke to me less like a child and more like a disappointing partner. You missed a row, Thomas. At plow lines crooked. Stop walking like your legs are porridge. Encouraging words, all of it. Still, there was pride. I had a tool of my own now, a scythe, too dull, but mine. I was trusted with animals, soil, even errands to the manor storehouse, provided the steward wasn't in one of his moods. I earned my bread and ate it knowing I had bled for it. The seasons ruled everything. Spring meant plowing and sowing, boots sunk in mud, hands raw from the handles. Summer meant endless days beneath a blazing sky, flies everywhere, skin blistered. Harvest was madness, no sleep, no rest, just cutting until your arms felt borrowed. Winter was when you wondered if your toes still belonged to you. Food didn't improve with age. If anything, I noticed scarcity more. Dinner was often barley stew, thick with bone scraps. Supper, when there was one, was cold, bread hardened on the hearth. Once I cracked a tooth on it. We laughed. Then we cried a little when we realized it was the last loaf. Water still came from the stream or the well, depending on which seemed less cursed that week. It tasted of moss and worry. We drank it anyway when beer ran out. As I grew older, I learned what grown men never said, how they studied the sky, how they listened to hens as if the birds carried news. Bad luck came often, a fever, a snapped cartwheel, a roof collapsing in the night. I helped pull 2 neighbors from rubble one morning. They didn't look peaceful. They looked surprised. Around then I noticed girls, how they carried buckets with practiced grace, how they laughed even with soaked shoes and raw hands. There was one named Elswith from near the mill. She smelled faintly of flowers and once slipped me an extra apple slice when she thought I looked pale. I remembered that apple for weeks. Courtship wasn't poetry. It was shared glances over manure, a song during harvest, maybe sitting together at a feast. Love was optional. Land was not. I wasn't ready to marry. I owned 1 tunic and a pair of patched shoes, but I was expected to serve the manor now. Every peasant owed labor to the Lord, days worked on his land without pay. You showed up, stacked his hay, and collapsed later. One summer I hauled stones for a wall around his herb garden. My back ached for a week. I didn't even like herbs. By then I knew how to stay silent around power.
You didn't question the reeve. You didn't question the steward. You never questioned the Lord, even if his velvet hat made him look ridiculous. Religion pressed harder now. I knelt at Mass, mumbled Latin, confessed sins I wasn't sure counted. Wanting more bread, cursing a hay fork, kicking a chicken. Father Oswin told me to pray harder. Sometimes I fell asleep mid-prayer, worn thin by cold and labor, and the knowledge that nothing was guaranteed. The manorial court became familiar. Disputes over land, livestock, theft, fines, whippings. I watched, I learned. I kept my head down. Sometimes I dreamed of leaving, a town, a trade, anything else. Those thoughts came when rain leaked through the roof, or when I stood ankle-deep in manure, wondering if this was all there was. Then I'd look at my brothers, my mother by the hearth, my father snoring, the pig curled nearby, and I remembered this was life. And it wasn't all misery. There was music sometimes, a fiddle, a pipe, a song raised on an evening when work ended early and ale hadn't run dry, stories told by candlelight, the steady rhythm of it all. The seasons, the first green shoots of spring, the gold weight of autumn sheaves, the deep hush that winter snow laid over everything. And slowly I saw I was no longer the smallest boy in the field. There were younger ones now. They watched how I tied a rope, how I set a blade, and they asked the questions I once asked.
I was not yet a man, but I was no longer a child. My shoulders filled out. My hands stopped splitting open on the scythe. My back only ached when rain was coming. One morning, my father handed me a bundle of tools without a word. He just nodded. That was it. No blessing, no speech. My welcome into the long line of men who had worked the same soil, under the same sky, for longer than anyone could remember. I took the tools because that was what you did. You carried on. I had already seen enough of courtship before it touched my own life. Not the kind with flowers and promises. That sort lived in songs, not in villages, where mornings began knee-deep in pig muck and evenings ended scraping oats from a pot. Courtship where I lived was about timing, bodies, and barley. You did not fall in love, you became useful together. By 15, I was tall enough to reach the thatch and lean enough not to eat too much. That was marriageable. I had no boots of my own and nothing like charm, but I could haul water, swing a scythe, and chew turnips privately. That was enough. My parents began speaking of Ellen the year I moved from the floor to the loft. She was a year younger, known for spinning, broad-shouldered from churning butter since she could stand. We had exchanged maybe 6 words in our lives. 5 of them were about the ladle. Our families needed the same things: hands, grain, a quiet union. The agreement felt less like romance and more like a trade. My father spoke with hers while I stood nearby, busy with nothing. They talked yields and labor and the lack of better choices. Then there was a handshake, a nod. Spring was chosen. Spring came late. The mud lingered. 2 men died in the next village. Still, when the bells rang on the feast day, we stood before the priest in our second-best clothes. The words were Latin. We did not know them. The vows were practiced. The kiss was awkward. Then we were married. The feast was bread, hard cheese, thin stew, and ale strong enough to quiet grief. People danced until shoes came off. No one went hungry. That was enough to call it good. Ellen and I moved into the back corner of my family's cottage, divided by a curtain cut from an old sack. Our bed was straw over uneven boards. It was not soft, but it was ours. Marriage did not change the work. It doubled it. I fetched water first. She stirred the pot. I fixed fences. She spun wool. We learned how to miss each other's worst moments of tiredness. There was nothing poetic in it, but it was steady. Steady mattered. Ellen was quiet, but sharp. She remembered stores and debts. She knew when to nod in church, even when her eyes were closing. She could shame a peddler into honest change without raising her voice. I respected her long before I liked her. Children were expected. That was the point. It took time. The first winter was hard. Food ran thin. Ellen fell ill in the spring and recovered slowly. We said nothing about children that year. The next year, she carried one. She worked until last week. No doctor came, just old Mab, who smelled of sweat and years and had delivered nearly everyone I knew. The labor lasted all night. I carved lines in frozen dirt until my hands went numb. When I heard the crying, then another, I thought my ears were lying. Twins, a boy and a girl, Will and Alice. Will died 6 days later. He simply did not wake. We buried him by the oak with a cross made from a dry branch. Grief stayed, but life did not pause. It never does. Alice lived. She laughed early. Her laugh sounded like water over stone. We held on to that sound. We did not speak of dreams. Dreams were for people with land and books. We spoke of fences, pigs, and weather. Still, some nights, when the fire was low and Alice slept against Ellen's arm, I thought of a second room, of teaching her letters. Then the wind would cut through the roof, and I would remember myself. Thomas, son, husband, father, a man with cracked hands, and a woman who warmed stew without being asked. That was enough.
The years passed in small gains, another pig, a borrowed strip of land, a better tool. Each gain meant more work, more watching eyes, but it also shaped our place. I became Thomas who fixed roofs, Thomas who lent seed, Thomas whose child lived. That kind of notice mattered. Ellen became known too, not loud, just exact. She remembered who owed what and when. Ask Ellen, she would know. By our 5th year, we had another child, a son named Hugh. He was loud and hungry and strong. I paid Mab with eggs and rushes. She smiled with half her teeth. Marriage taught me to look ahead, not far, just to winter, to leeks, to boots, to save tallow. That was enough vision. We had inner lives, even if no one wrote them down. We just didn't have time to sit inside them. One day I woke and no one told me what to do. They assumed I already knew. That was how adulthood arrived, quietly. The year carved itself into my body. Spring bent my back. Summer split my hands. Autumn stained my knees. And winter tested whether you would see spring again. And each year, somehow, I did.
Days to the steward, dozens on paper, closer to 100 in truth. I harvest the Lord's grain before my own, repair roads that wash out every spring, and help raise buildings I will never enter. Last year, it was a granary. The year before, a gatehouse. This year, the talk is of a dovecote for birds we are forbidden to eat. Then there is the tithe. 1/10 of everything goes to the church. In theory, it feeds God. In practice, it means that from 10 sheaves of barley, 9 come home, if no one adjusts the count along the way. The priest says it keeps us humble. I say it keeps him well fed. The rest of my time is spent trying not to fall behind. A fence breaks, I mend it. A pig sickens, I call a neighbor who once saved his cousin's hog with an onion and a prayer. The thatch leaks, and Ellen and I climb onto the roof with straw, moss, and once the hide of a goat that had served its purpose. It stopped the rain. It did nothing for the smell. Food follows luck as much as labor. A good year means full bowls. A bad one means thin broth and tighter belts. Most meals are pottage, grain, weeds, maybe an onion. Meat is rare. Eggs depend on the hens. Milk depends on whether the cow is in the mood to cooperate. Ellen makes the most of it, but even she cannot turn turnips into miracles. Barter keeps us afloat. A few eggs become thread. A day threshing another man's field earns smoked fish. Every favor is counted, quietly, carefully. Everyone owes someone, and everyone remembers. Rest is mostly a change of motion. We mend tools while watching children. We gossip while gathering firewood. We pray not because we are idle, but because prayer is the only task that requires stillness. Sometimes I think, is this all there is? And then Alice runs in laughing, clutching a doll Ellen carved from a broken chair. Hugh tugs my sleeve, asking if he can help sharpen the sickle. I say yes, because yes, this is it. And some days it is enough. In this world, community is survival. The smith needs grain. The weaver needs meat. The priest needs wine, though he pretends otherwise. And all of us need one another when harvest comes. If a family falls ill, the rest step in, not out of charity, but because next time it may be you. There are days of rest, Sunday Mass, Saints' Days, a feast now and then when bread is softer and ale flows freely. We sit on logs, share stories, and pretend our backs do not ache. Those are the days we laugh, not because life is easy, but because laughter costs nothing. Scholars might call this subsistence farming and feudal obligation. What it feels like is bailing water from a leaking boat with your bare hands, day after day. Still, you rise each morning, you shoulder your tools, you nod to your neighbors, you do it again. The land does not wait, life does not wait. The hardest part is not the labor, it is the sameness. Each sunrise brings the same tasks in a slightly different order.
The plow still catches in the clay, the barn roof still sags, the oxen pull with all the enthusiasm of worn-out furniture, and through it all the ache settles deeper into your joints. Not sharp, not screaming, just always there. There is pride in knowing this order. I know frost by scent. I know barley by touch. I know when rain is coming by the way my knees complain. It is not book learning, but it is knowledge, hard-earned and bone-deep. Our fields follow the open field system, like every village for miles. No fences, only long strips scattered among families, so no one holds all the good land. Fair in theory, less so when your strips lie half a mile apart and the plow must be dragged between them. Once a year, the reeve walks the fields with tally sticks, counting who owes what. If your yield is good, you owe grain. If it is bad, you owe grain. Argue, and you will dig ditches until your hands blister anew. Merchants arrive in autumn with cloth, salt, and promises. They sell dear and buy cheap. I once traded 5 chickens for a spool of thread. A foolish bargain, but children need clothes, and chickens can be replaced. Children cannot. We have no inn, no market square, just the church steps and the dirt path, but we are a village all the same. Elders who remember the great fire, newlyweds hacking nettles into gardens, a man who swears he saw a saint in the clouds. Most nod and move on. Too much time alone breeds strange visions. Trust is practical, not sentimental. Borrow a scythe and return it sharper. Lend a hand, and someone will remember when your cart breaks. Complain too loudly, and word spreads. In a place like this, reputation works harder than muscle. Women keep the other half of the economy alive. Ellen spins, patches, boils nettles into soup. Children fetch wood and return with pine cones and bruises. Even the old ones, those who reach 50, still tend gardens or mend nets. No one is idle. If you are, people grow suspicious. And yet there is beauty in it. Mist curling over the fields in spring, the sound of grain hitting the bin, the moment after dusk when the hearth glows just enough to show Ellen's face, tired, steady, still smiling. That is not nothing. On feast days, the world softens, bread from the communal oven, ale passed freely. Even the Lord smiles, mostly because his wine is better than ours. Children roll hoops, old songs rise again. For a moment, the distance between manor and field narrows. It never lasts, but we remember it. So yes, the work is endless, the ache constant, the barley thinner than hoped. But somehow, through stubbornness more than faith, you rise each morning, pull on your boots, or what remains of them, and walk back into the field. Because this is your life, and if it is hard, it is also yours. Children are not planned. They arrive like frost, early or late, never asked for, always demanding. One moment it's just Ellen and me by the hearth. The next, a wailing bundle fills the room with noise and fear. Ellen gives birth in the same bed where we sleep and mend and argue over grain. No doctor comes, only the midwife, older than memory, and a pair of neighbor women boiling water and whispering prayers that are half Christian and half desperation. I wait outside, pretending to fix something that is not broken. Men are meant to stay out of the way until it's time to dig a grave. Most births end well enough. Some do not. There is always blood, sometimes too much. Ellen's first was stillborn. We buried him beneath the hawthorn. No name, just earth and a wooden cross I carved myself. When a child lives, the joy is sharp and frightening, like sunlight after a storm. You hold them and wonder how something so small can make the world feel so much heavier and so much more worth enduring.
The warmth lingers longest. Ellen nurses as best she can, though she is tired in a way that never lifts. When the milk thins, we feed the child pottage, watered down with ale. It isn't good. It's just what we have. There is no nursery. The baby sleeps between us, wrapped in a blanket that smells of soot and sheep. The old cradle burned 2 winters back when we ran out of wood. I carved another from pine, though it creaks like it knows secrets. Each time it rocks, I pray it holds together, not for the wood's sake, but for what it carries. Names are chosen quickly, not for beauty, but for use. A name you can shout across a field. William, Alice, Hugh, Joan. Something easy to carve into wood. Some parents wait weeks before naming a child to see if it stays. Others reuse names like patched coats. You learn not to grow attached too fast. Childhood is brief. As soon as they can walk, they gather sticks, chase chickens, run messages. By 7, they mind geese or weed rows. By 10, they help with the plow. Ellen teaches spinning and sewing. I teach knots, blades, and how to read the sky. We don't punish much. Life does that better than we ever could. Cold feet teach faster than words. Hunger sharpens lessons. Falling into the pond leaves its own mark. Stories help, not the grand ones with knights and glory. Ours are warnings, woods that whisper, saints who punish greed, beasts that remember debts. We tell them so the children know what to fear. Faith runs through everything. They learn to cross themselves, to kneel even when it hurts, to fast because the church watches. A careless word near the priest can turn into gossip, and gossip moves faster than flame. We hang herbs by the door, rue for protection, chamomile when a child won't settle. Ellen insists. I don't argue. When you've buried more than one child, you stop testing luck. Children are the only thing we leave behind. We own no land worth naming. We write nothing down. When we're gone, they are what remains. So we teach them what little we know, how to dig straight, how to soothe a burn, how to tell good mold from the kind that kills. Small knowledge, but it may last longer than we do. Every cough in the night feels like a warning. Every fever is a question with no answer. There is no medicine to speak of, only boiled plants and quiet prayers. If the child lives, you give thanks. If not, you dig again. There is no time to stop. Privacy doesn't exist. One room means shared breath, shared smoke. One child wakes coughing, and everyone does. Ellen sings softly, the same old songs her mother sang, saints, spirits, hunger, bread. We hang rowan branches above the door. I don't believe they keep sickness away. I also don't take them down. Feast days matter more to children than to us. A pig roasted, sweet dough on St. Martin's Day, bare feet on frost, laughter loud enough to scare the crows. They remember those days. Even in winter they play with bones and sticks, make dolls from straw, helmets from broken pots. I once watched my son march through snow, commanding chickens like soldiers. No one was watching. That didn't matter. They ask questions. Do kings eat like we do? Do priests sleep warm? Are there places without snow, where soup doesn't taste of roots and worry? I don't lie, but I don't always tell the whole truth either. Hope is a thin thing. You keep it close. Winter tests the small ones hardest. Fingers crack, lips turn blue. We wrap them in everything we own. We heat stones and tuck them near their feet, begging for one more hour of rest. I've seen Ellen scoop a child from the blankets just to feel his breath against her chest. The midwife says loss is normal. I hate that word, but I nod and chop more wood because the fire won't wait for grief. One year, the river froze thick enough for boys to slide across it on flattened bones tied with string. They fell, bruised themselves raw, and laughed until they couldn't breathe. I still think about that. Laughter on ice, proof that winter doesn't always win. Not everyone is so lucky. Our neighbors lost 3 children in a month. The father went quiet. The mother never smiled again.
She worked and stared through people as if they weren't there. Grief doesn't shout. It settles in and stays. There is pride in watching a child grow useful. Our eldest can mend fences now. He checks snares, counts chickens better than I do. I watch him from the doorway sometimes, moving with purpose, jaw set hard. For a moment, I think he might have an easier life. I never say it. Hope like that breaks easily. The pain starts in the knees. It always does. Then the shoulders. Then the back stiffens and the hands curl like old roots. You're not even 40, but your body disagrees. When I grip a tool, my knuckles crack like kindling. The ache never screams. It just stays. Sickness doesn't visit. It lives with you. One winter, Ellen coughed so hard I thought the roof would come down. We boiled onion and ale, rubbed goose fat on her chest, hung garlic from the beams. She lived. That was enough proof for me. There is no doctor here, only old Wren in the woods, healer or witch, depending on who you ask. She knows plants the way I know soil, what stops blood, what brings strength, what poisons quietly. Her cures stink. You drink them, sweat, and hope. If that fails, someone bleeds you. Let the sickness out, they say. I think it lets the strength go first. The church has cures too. Holy water, relics, prayers stacked high enough to crush a man. Once, when our boy broke out in a rash, they brought a splinter said to come from a saint's coffin and touched it to his skin. The rash faded days later. Was it the relic? Time? Luck? We said thank you and didn't ask. You stop asking after a while. You work, you endure, you hold your family close when the night turns cold. And if a child survives another winter, you call it what it is, a miracle small enough to fit in your arms, heavy enough to shape the rest of your life.
Standing, crossing yourself, it reminds you that time is moving, even when every day feels the same. When Ellen lights a candle for a sick child, she isn't thinking about doctrine. She's thinking about hope, about doing something instead of nothing. We don't separate God from the world. He's in the rain that ruins the grain and the sun that saves it. He's in the sickness and the recovery. He's in the birth cry and the burial prayer. Whether that makes him kind or cruel depends on the day. Most days we don't ask. As the years pass, belief settles into something quieter, less fear, more habit. You stop imagining heaven as a reward and start imagining it as rest. No more cold, no more counting loaves, no more waking with pain already waiting. Just stillness. That thought carries you through the long winters more than any sermon ever did. The church bell keeps ringing. It rings for births and deaths, for weddings and warnings, for saints we barely remember and sins we can't forget. It marks the hours whether we want it to or not. Sometimes when I'm out in the field and the wind carries that sound across the dirt and furrows, I stop for just a moment. I lean on my tool, I breathe, and I listen. Not because I expect answers, but because the sound means I'm still here to hear it. My name is Thomas. I have lived a life shaped by work, belief, loss, and endurance. I have buried children and raised others. I have doubted quietly and prayed loudly. I have done what was expected of me because expectation is the strongest law we have. And tomorrow, like every day before it, I will rise, stretch a body that no longer wants to be stretched, and step back into the work that waits. Not because it is holy, not because it is fair, but because it is mine. Heaven is vague, pearly gates, singing angels, light without edges. Hell, though, hell is detailed. It has levels, rules, punishments, and demons with names. Makes you wonder which place the clergy thinks about more. There's a saint for everything. Saint Apollonia for toothaches, Saint Anthony for lost animals, Saint Scholastica for storms. We don't just light candles, we bargain, we beg favors.
Some wear tokens, others whisper prayers into tree trunks or bury relics in their gardens. Officially, that isn't approved, but we're peasants. We take protection wherever we can find it. Superstition fills the gaps the church leaves open. A dream of falling means death is coming. A barn owl in the rafters means a curse. If the fire hisses without wind, someone in the room is lying. We hang horseshoes over doors, place iron near cradles, and never, never speak the name of someone recently buried after dark. Old Wren keeps bones wrapped in cloth under her bed, says they're saints' relics. Agnes says that rats. But when the crops failed last year, even Agnes went to Wren for a blessing. When the priest leaves the village, Wren visits the sick. She burns herbs, mutters words no one claims to understand, and presses rough hands to fevered skin. Half the time people get better. The priest doesn't ask how. Confession is its own ritual. You kneel on cold stone and list your sins: envy, pride, sloth, that time you swore at a cow. The priest assigns prayers like tallies. Small sin, 5 Hail Marys. Bigger sin, longer kneeling. The trick is never confessing anything that might lead to public penance. Sometimes they flog people in the square: a boy who stole bread, a woman who cursed during childbirth. The church calls it correction. The rest of us call it spectacle. We watch because not watching looks suspicious, and because when life is grim, it's hard to look away from suffering that isn't yours. Justice here isn't about fairness, it's about fear. Obedience matters more than understanding, so we bow our heads and avoid questions without safe answers. Even holidays belong to the church: Christmas, Easter, Pentecost, days meant for rest, but never joy without guilt. We fast, attend Mass, and maybe, if the Lord allows, eat something better than gruel. Once we had venison. The priest called it a gift. I saw the squire dragging the deer 2 days earlier. Maybe the saints delivered it, or maybe they were busy elsewhere. Still, ritual comforts: lighting a candle for a lost child, kneeling beside your wife as she prays for a better harvest, holding a trembling hand in confession and whispering something heavy enough it can't be spoken aloud. I've buried friends clutching rosaries. I've heard men beg for mercy with their last breath. The church promises heaven to the faithful, but when the ground is frozen and your stomach is empty, faith feels like a coin tossed into the dark. Maybe it lands somewhere good, maybe it doesn't. Still, I pray every night for my children, for Ellen, for the animals, even for Agnes, just in case. I try to be good, not clever, not important, just good. In a world where you have no title, no coin, no say, goodness is the only thing you get to choose. Sometimes that has to be enough. Every family has a miracle story, or something close enough. My grandmother swore a virgin appeared in frost on the window. My uncle claimed a saint spared his leg after he dreamed of fire. Are they true? Who knows? But when snow presses down on the roof and the fire burns low, we tell those stories, again, not because they're certain, but because they're kind, and kindness is rare. So tomorrow I'll rise with the bell, bow my head at Mass, and thank the saints I've made it this far, not because it's easy, because it's what we do. We endure, we believe, we carry on. One prayer, one superstition, one cold morning at a time. It's strange feeling old in a body that's barely seen 4 decades. I'm 40, give or take. No one's really counting, and I creak like the barn door in November. My name is still Thomas. I've worked these fields since I could stand upright. I carry more scars than memories now. Most mornings I feel like a tree struck by lightning that never quite fell. They call us old when our backs curve and our teeth start dropping, not because we've earned honor, but because it's rare to reach this age at all. Most don't. Most are buried before they ever complain about aching joints or bread that tastes like dirt. So here I am, still breathing, still bending, one stubbed toe away from becoming a warning story. My hands tremble now when I grip the plow, My knees complain with every bend. I carry a stick, not because I want to, but because pride doesn't keep you upright. You'd think I'd earned rest, but the fire still needs lighting, the roof still leaks, the animals still eat. Ellen tells me to slow down. I tell her the work doesn't wait. So I move slower, I ache louder, I pretend I'm still sharp. Age comes fast when your life is mud, wind, and hunger. The sun carves your face, cold hollows your bones. Even when hunger doesn't kill you, it leaves a mark. Loss leaves deeper ones. I've buried my father, my sister, one of my boys. You don't scream, you nod, you dig, you clean the hearth afterwards like it might undo things. Some turn bitter, some go quiet. I mostly talk to the fire now. When you outlive 2 generations, children ask you advice, as if survival equals wisdom. It doesn't. Half of survival is luck. The rest is stubborn refusal to lie down. There's no retirement here. When you can't work fields, you mend tools. When you can't mend, you scare crows. When you can't do that, you tell stories and hope someone leaves bread.
Meals grow smaller. The young get the good cuts. They've got work to do. I chew slowly now, carefully, every bite negotiated. My hearing fades. Sometimes I pretend not to hear insults. Other times I truly don't. Let them think I'm soft. There's peace in being underestimated. I see my reflection sometimes in the trough. Sunken cheeks, graying beard, eyes that have seen too much and remember too little. Hair like dry hay. Ellen says I'm still handsome. I let her. I say it keeps me sane. There's not much difference anymore. Sometimes I walk to the edge of the village and just stand there, looking at the trees. I used to climb them as a boy. Now I watch the wind move through their branches and wonder which will fall first, me or the oak by the stream. The lads think I've grown strange, quiet, soft, thoughtful. But that's just what happens when you live long enough. You run out of noise. You realize most arguments weren't worth the breath, and most of the people you argued with are gone anyway. You start noticing smaller things, frost clinging to the edge of a window like lace, the sound of Ellen's stitching late at night, the smell of fresh straw on the floor. They don't seem like much, but when your bones ache and your days blur together, these details are what anchor you. You also begin to reckon with what you did and didn't do. The child you scolded too harshly, the feast day you skipped just to rest, the neighbor you never quite forgave. These small things linger long after the larger memories fade. The lads say I'm lucky to have made it this far. They don't see the cost, how every cough feels like a warning, how each winter carries the quiet question of whether it will be the last. They see me smile and think I've made peace with things. Most days, I'm simply tired. I still work in my own way. I sharpen tools. I teach the younger ones how not to lose a thumb to a sickle. I sit with the dying when no one else can bear it. That last one matters. There's something sacred about being there at the end. It isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It's quiet, like a candle going out when no one is looking. I pray more now, not for myself, but for my children, for Ellen, for the strength to keep rising each morning, even when I'd rather not. Faith changes with age. It stops being about reward and becomes rhythm, like breath, like seasons. So I carry on, slowly, quietly, with a limp in my step and 1,000 memories in my bones. I don't know how much time I have left, but I know how to use it. I'll feed the fire, I'll teach the young, I'll kiss Ellen's cheek while she's still within reach, because even in a world built to forget men like me, I remember, and I endure until I can't. And even then, the sun will rise. Someone else, maybe one of mine, will carry the pail to the field and remember my name, if only in passing. There's no grand ending, no parade, no name carved into stone. When a peasant dies, the world keeps turning. Bread keeps baking. Animals still need feeding. But for the handful of people who knew your laugh, your limp, or the way you always cursed at the rooster, it matters, at least for a while. I always knew how it would end. Not dramatic, not clean, just slow. A fire shrinking each winter until one day it goes out for good. There are no doctors, no warm beds, no last-minute miracles, just a straw mattress, a bucket nearby, and people trying not to look too worried or too relieved. The signs come gently. You wake later, eat less. The strength leaves your hands like frost at sunrise. Ellen watches me closely now, not with fear, but with that steady attentiveness she's always had. She knows I'm slipping. So do I. I've started putting things in order, not because death can be scheduled, but because I don't want to leave a mess. I've shown our eldest where the good tools are buried, told him which wall leaks when it rains, where I once kept dried rosemary for Ellen's soup, though I doubt it smells of anything now. The days feel heavier, dimmer at the edges, like dusk that never quite lifts. But I'm not afraid. I've lived through famine, frost, and funerals. Death isn't a stranger anymore, more like a neighbor who knocks now and then just to see if you're home. The priest has come twice this week. He doesn't say it outright, but he carries his little book now, tucked under his arm, waiting. Last time he asked if I had sins to confess. I told him I did, but the rooster incident was probably the worst. He didn't laugh. Ellen did. We peasants don't get grand funerals. No choirs, no carved angels. If you're lucky, you get a box. More often, it's a woolen wrap, a short prayer, and a shallow grave near the chapel wall. The blessing matters. Without it, you risk worse things. I've seen too many buried without rites, taken too fast by fever while the priest was elsewhere, laid to rest with nothing but hurried hands and whispered hope. I pray that won't be me. I've paid my tithes, honored the saints, fasted even when there was food worth fasting from. I remember old Gerard, slipped by the well, broke his leg, never stood again. We wrapped him in his patched cloak and buried him beneath the yew tree. His widow laid his walking stick beside him, said he might need it where he was going. Burials are quiet here. The bell tolls once, maybe twice. Neighbors come if they can. Work rarely stops. The village doesn't pause for one stopped heart. And yet there's grace in the simplicity. No speeches, no stone monuments, just familiar hands, familiar dirt, and a cross made from crooked branches. We don't mark our dead with marble. We mark them with stories. How he laughed, how she always fixed the roof before anyone asked, how someone once ate an entire onion on a dare. That's how we live on. I've asked Ellen to sing when the time comes, just a soft hymn, nothing fancy. Her voice is gentle, like a lullaby wrapped in wool. I'd rather leave to that than the priest's wheezing Latin. The children treat me differently now. My youngest granddaughter asked if I'll turn into a ghost. I told her only if she keeps stealing turnips from the cellar. She laughed, but I saw the worry in her eyes. There's an old custom here. When death comes, you open the windows, even in winter, to let the soul out. I don't know if I believe it. I've left instructions anyway. And legacy, a strange word for a man who owns nothing. No land, no title, no coin. But maybe legacy isn't gold. Maybe it's the fence I mended, the prayer I whispered beside a sickbed, the way my son kneels before supper without being told. The church promises reward after death, a place without hunger or pain or cold feet. I hope that's true, but I've learned not to count on promises, especially after foxes. Still, I wonder what they'll say of me, that I worked hard, that I loved Ellen,
that I always patched the thatch before the rains. Maybe that's enough. Ellen says she'll bury me near the elder tree if the ground isn't frozen. I like that place. In spring it smells of sweetness and old wood, and if she sets the little rooster carving there, the one I made, I suppose I'll go with a bit of a smirk. So when the end comes, and I think it's close now, I'll meet it like every storm and failed harvest before it, with quiet resignation, a muttered curse, and a scrap of hope. Not for heaven, for memory, for a life lived, not easily, but completely. It isn't the fear of death that weighs heaviest. It's the fear of being forgotten, of vanishing like smoke up a chimney.
Chimney. But I take comfort knowing my hand shaped this place. Every furrow, every fence post. The village remembers in quiet ways. A saying repeated, herbs growing where I once dropped seeds. A crooked post no one ever fixed because that's how Thomas said it. And when Ellen lights the hearth long after I'm gone, the warmth will still reach the same corners. Maybe that's all we can ask. To have mattered quietly, to have been part of something that keeps breathing after we don't. So I close my eyes. No speech, just fire crackle, the smell of peat, the steady rhythm of life continuing as it always has,